2. Hello. Good morning. Sunday morning. It's not morning.
We're back.
Here we are. Did you miss us? Hope you did, because we already have two concurrent viewers. Wow. You know, it was better with 3. It's actually much better with 3.
Yeah, that was significantly better than 2.
Oh, well, you know. You win some, you lose some. We're back. This is the Get the Mic podcast. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And welcome back. We are doing a special Sunday show because we missed Thursday. Things have been kind of crazy for our resident warlock. Do you want to say anything about that?
Just in the process of moving, getting everything set up. Not a lot of time to work with right now. But we found some here on a Sunday. And it's early, so we've got as much time as we need to really get into this. We're both wide awake.
Right, and that's a big part of it. So we're going to try, and that brings us to our first point. So we have some announcements, everyone. Everyone listening to the stream. And going into the future, hopefully this is consistent. Maybe it won't be, but you know.
I think we do this every episode. We say, here's the new idea, and then we have no idea how it turns out.
Well, right. I mean, there's a lot of flux happening right now, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is our new schedule. We won't be streaming on Thursday, but possibly on Sunday.
Possibly. I think
Possibly
we're going
on
to
Sunday.
aim to try to make this a recurring Sunday thing and get a more consistent schedule going. We'll have to see if it works, obviously, but that's ideal. I think that we're going to plan for it and we're going to try for it.
Perfect. Yeah, so possibly on Sundays we're going to start streaming in the afternoon. Maybe earlier than this. My sleep schedule's been pretty bad. I've been an owl. I've been an actual owl recently, and it's been bad for me. I don't recommend anyone staying up late. As you can see, the moon there, you know, there's some majesty to the night, but you need to get a good sleep schedule.
That's not to neglect your circadian rhythms.
True. Last thing, so that brings us to our next point. Over the next couple of weeks, we should be releasing our recap video of season 1. We just want to plug it here so you guys can be on the lookout for it. It'll be a condensed version of the big ideas that we've come up with for season 1, an analysis of those, and we might have some. Well, I think we'll pretty much be mostly in agreement. I think there's some stuff you want to say this episode though, to reinforce points you made previously, but we'll get into that.
Sure, yeah. Well, we'll definitely be coming at it from a perspective that we both know what we want to say, and it'll be a lot more concise. But we don't know how long it's going to take to set up, so you'll just have to bear with us on that one.
Correct. And that's pretty much all the announcements we have. As far as addendums, from the feedback we received from you, our great and generous fans, we didn't seem to have too many critiques in the last to correct. Unlike, let's say, episode 12, which we had to do an entire episode correcting it.
Basically. No, I think that we hit all the points we both wanted to hit in the last episode. I had one idea of an addendum, but it's literally the beginning of this episode, so...
Yeah, so we have most of that on track, so let's go ahead and get started. Remember, this is Get the Mic, and this is episode 13, The Legend of Goku. And I like the English version of it. I think the Japanese version is more...
Literal?
Probably more literal, but it does have to do with the legend of Goku. And we're going to get into what a legend is.
The legend.
Yeah. So this should be a pretty exciting episode. I hope you're all strapped in. Let's get started.
Oh, yeah.
So here's our first thing. The title slide, shot, frame.
I like this panel a lot. I mean, we have a satellite pointed up at the moon with the Dragon Balls here in the forefront. I mean, what's happening with Goku right now? He is orienting himself upwards towards the moon, and that is Goku's great transformation. I think the concept of this specifically showing a satellite being receptive of the moon is, well, that's the thing. That's what it's about.
Well, the moon is a satellite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say. Interesting. So you're interpreting the satellite as being, let's say, concurrent with the status of the moon being a satellite of Earth?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's also that thing, there's the idea about the moon. It's more of a Jungian idea with the phases of the moon, with it, when it's full, sort of that it's a portal into the wisdom on that other side, on the side of darkness, on the unconscious in your sleep, right? And so we're seeing it here. I like just showing a satellite pointed up towards the moon to sort of represent that being receptive of the wisdom that is on the other side of that whenever the moon is full.
Interesting. And we're going to see how that reception plays out. We'll see who's receptive and who's not. Because certain characters are, and I would say certain characters aren't.
Certain characters definitely are not.
So, let's go ahead and continue. And I think this is going to bring us into our first addendum, quasi-addendum, because it's the very start of the episode. So, Brock, I'm going to go ahead and let you say your piece on the moon at this point.
It's not much more than I was saying. It's just this idea that with the moon having phases and that it sort of becomes brighter and brighter and then it becomes a full circle, that in sort of the Jungian psychology, the weirdness that is the way that Jung wrote about these things, there are names for the different phases of the moon and what they mean in somebody's life and what it means to them on a personal level, right? And so we mentioned briefly in the last episode that...
Well, don't forget lunar calendars as well.
Well, I don't know as much about that if you want to weigh in on it.
Oh, I just want to mention, like, lunar calendars were based on that very cycle of the moon. And I don't want to say they had, like, similar things, let's say similar transformations, right? Or let's say manifestations of the shadow. But I do want to say that, yeah, I mean, the lunar calendar was significant in Eastern culture specifically.
Yeah, and not only that, I feel like there's... So you think about the fact that the moon controls the tides as well, with its proximity to different areas on the planet, and that while it's going through those cycles, it also changes in appearance and sort of... It's archetypal in nature because we've based our perception of time and the cyclical nature of our experience on that.
Well, I mean, also the transformation the moon undergoes over time, like Goku's transformation here. But I want to mention something you said earlier about it being a portal to the wisdom, right?
Right.
I think that's also a double-edged sword. I think it's also a portal to the bestiality of nature, and that's pretty much of humankind, let's say, which is what's on display here. Because
that's what is deep in the unconscious.
Well, because also think about werewolves. Werewolves mythologically are that very same thing, right? It's that you can take this transformation, you can take this light, right? Even though it's faux light, it's from the sun, but you can take this light and it can be a portal to that wisdom. And in the hero's journey, like typically that middle part where they find their courage is during the night or underground or somewhere away from the sun.
Right, and you had pointed out that it's like the white drop in the yin and yang, you know. It is the...
Yeah, exactly.
It is the... being a perfect circle in there, right? It's that droplet of wisdom that exists in the darkness.
Right, and then here... it's that it's the idea of what Dr. Peterson was saying, and I think we discussed this a little bit last time about those who have swords and know how to use them but keep them sheathed shall inherit the world. That kind of prophecy from the Bible, let's say. This is Goku.
This is Goku picking up that sword.
Well, yeah, this is Goku with the inability to refuse it.
Yeah.
Because, and we'll figure out why later. I don't want to get too much into it because it's going to come into play a lot later. Like, we'll probably mention this Oozaru several times before we're done.
Well, I think we're going to have to get way deeper into it when we get into the World Tournament, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I don't want to get too into it now, but this is the him picking up that destruction.
The destructive nature of that.
His full destructive potential.
Yeah, potential is a good way to
what
put it.
He can be if he chooses to be.
Right, but the idea that it is something that is too old and too powerful to be just controlled. It's sort of like
Not at first.
not at first, obviously.
Right.
If not integrated. Right.
Exactly. If not integrated. And so
So yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the moon because I mean, if you're talking about archetypes, like the moon is extremely potent.
hey, last night was a full moon.
Was it?
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Crazy. Well, yeah, so I wanted to touch on that. You wanted to touch on that actually, Brock. I'm glad you did because I also had it in my notes about the moon transformations, Goku, things we had to talk about mythologically on that level, and how he is now the embodiment of destruction.
Well, speaking
Way
also,
more than Beerus.
I don't want to talk about it. But also, I do want to point out in this panel, because you were talking about the embodiment of destruction, right? Goku is literally seeing red, and there's sort of an archetypal idea that, this is back in like Greek mythology too, that you're sort of possessed by these ideas that the gods represent. It's like you can be possessed by a spirit of rage or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why the Oozaru's eyes are red. It's like he is an embodiment and a possession of that. It's more of a core, deep idea. It's almost like an embodiment of that idea. Similar to how I'm not that read in mythology. Not as much as you are, but I think you can probably articulate what I'm saying a bit better.
I think, I don't want to, I think it goes further than a lot of mythology, which is why I don't want to get too into it now, because this is just the introduction of the idea that the pureness and let's say forthrightness of Goku has the potential to be this destructive force in the world.
That the way that Goku has that potential, yeah.
It's not the way that Goku is. Specifically, it's the culmination of Goku, which is
That's a good way of putting it.
Right. It's the culmination of Goku, and it's specifically because there are aspects of him that we'll get into that are very, very important for the mythological reading as we go on, and why this is a contemporary mythological text that needs to be read and dissected, I would say,
Yeah,
more than it
respected.
is. Definitely respected. All right, so that's this?
Yeah,
we're
that's
good.
it.
Cool. So they break out. Goku breaks them out, almost crushes them all, but doesn't really pay attention to them.
Yeah, it doesn't
the
really
most
have
part.
any mind for them. Not yet.
But I just wanted to put this so that we could see the progression of the story.
Mhm.
You can see also, I do want to mention that the unbridled force that is Goku at this point is easily able to crush any of the constructs laid in his way from the faux malevolence that's Pilaf. This isn't... Goku now is representing more malevolence than Pilaf is.
I mean, it's almost like Goku's representing malevolence as such, right? It's like...
It's a rudimentary one.
Yeah.
It's not an unholy trinity or anything.
No,
it's
it's
not
just
a conscious.
That's why I keep making jokes about ideas. It's like,
Mhm.
no, this is an idea that Goku's embodying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And also, just point out the stars. We've been talking about stars for a few episodes now. And every panel of this as a manga is just packed with the imagery.
Stars or mushrooms.
I'm surprised that there's no mushroom in this panel. I mean, there's a mushroom in almost every shot of this episode. For good reason.
Mm-hmm. And I again, they were made to look up at the stars and see the unattainable enlightenment. That was kind of the sick joke that Pilaf was playing on them by showing them that very thing.
Right, and as Goku has broken through the ceiling, now it is, well, it's more attainable than it was. Not that it's truly attainable, but it's more attainable.
Right. And we'll see some bits of enlightenment shower down upon our characters this episode. So let's go ahead and continue. So Goku's destroying the castle. Pilaf trying to get some sleep. It's so noisy, I can't get any sleep, says Pilaf.
I think we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, that it not only awakens Pilaf, but also awakens his bestial masculine and his more integrated feminine elements in response to this happening, you know. It's sort of unconsciousness to consciousness. We see that it awakens him.
Yeah, that's true, but also I want to mention his unconsciousness at the threat apparent, right? This is exactly the mistake you'd expect someone who doesn't truly have that malevolent streak. He could have killed them right away. In fact, I think it's mentioned later on.
Yeah, he says I should have.
Yeah, but he doesn't because he doesn't actually want to. He's not actually malevolent.
Right, he wants to satisfy his ego by saying he could, but he doesn't want to take responsibility for that malevolence.
Right, exactly. And so here he'd rather be unconscious of the present danger, right, than actually carrying through. And that's a big difference between the truly malevolent and those who have malevolent thoughts.
Right. I mean, this is... Well, I don't want to get into it, but yeah. This ties into sort of...
Then you could get into it.
Well, it's sort of like the halfway point of Dragonball with what happens with Krillin and stuff like that. It's...
Oh, I see.
The introduction
Don't get that far.
No, yeah. But the introduction of the carrying through of the malevolence and sort of the shock that comes with it, because up until then it's sort of the idea all the time. It's just like flexing. It's all these people claiming to have something that they don't really have. I mean, not just Pilaf, you know.
Not just Pilaf, right? But Pilaf is the first example because he's the.
Which I pointed out Krillin, but there's another better example I probably should have.
But we're gonna get to
yeah.
it because let's say Oolong is the hero of this story.
Right.
Pilaf is the antagonist of this story. They both spirit they're trying to embody later on, and we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just wanted to put this in because of his unconsciousness. His eyes are not very open.
Right.
But now they are. But now they are. And so Goku starts smashing. You know, they try to like fight him off. I didn't really think that was necessary. This is just some gags.
Yeah. I mean, the point just being that they obviously can't.
Yeah, they obviously can't. So they just start running. And I just wanted to put this in for plot context and to mention Pilaf's awareness. Nothing wakes you up more than seeing a snake, right?
It's kind of a funny comparison to make, you know, that of all the things to represent that snake.
Yeah, here is the snake.
It's the snake inside you, right?
Right, but exactly right. It is the snake inside you.
Mm-hmm.
Snakes everywhere. Snakes all over the shop.
You'll be one of them sooner or later.
Give us a B in the chat if anyone knows that reference. Anyway, so right, I just wanted to put that in. Is there anything you had to say about this?
No. Goku smash.
Goku smash. So they're trying to flee away from Goku, but this part is significant. So Yamcha climbs up the wall. They're trying to get him out of there, and he leaves Bluma to do it on her own. What a slugger move.
This is a theme throughout the episode with Yamcha needing to take the responsibility of how would I want to word it? Needing to take the responsibility that comes with what his wish is, right? Because his wish, essentially, he keeps claiming that his wish is to get a girlfriend. It's like to be brave enough to get a girlfriend. It's like he's confronted repeatedly over and over and over. If you want that, then you need to take the responsibility for that. So we see the first inkling of it in this episode, which is mainly this episode that this specific instantiation of it comes up. And so we see it here that they're trying to escape from the ruins of, you know, what the castle is, which we've talked about. And Yamcha's like, yeah, I'm out. And Bulma calls him out right here and says, you know, you could help me, but you're not helping me. Well, somebody can help her and does help her.
Right, and I think it's even a little bit more archetypal than that, because it is instructive of what the fledgling masculine can do in the situation, and that is to help the archetypal feminine, to protect the archetypal feminine. What can you do, right, to put yourself higher in the hierarchy than you currently are?
Right. How can you
can protect, let's say, the most vulnerable.
I don't want to say
society.
escalate, but how
most vulnerable and important as well, because don't forget.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a call to nurture and not to just seek the safety of the self too. It's sort of like we talk about play. You know, Yamcha has started to figure out the idea of play and sort of be reciprocal in that sense, right?
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about male disposability, because in my opinion, this is the idea, right? This is a microcosm of the idea of men letting women and children on the lifeboats first in a shipwreck.
Right. I think Dr. Peterson talked about that a little bit with the technical aspect of our ancestry, with us having more. How did he put it?
One male can sire many more offspring in their life than one female.
And he was also pointing out the imbalance of how many male versus female ancestors that we have, right? And so this is sort of hearkening back to that idea that is, you know, it sounds like we might get a little bit mired in this, but yeah, I just wanted to say, like,
well, that's also why Chi-Chi is so precious.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how Chi-Chi differs from Bluma too.
Right,
sort of.
It's even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But in a microcosm, this is that idea, in my opinion. That's why.
Well, that's why that's a theme in this episode too.
Definitely.
Because it's about that integration.
How the fledgling masculine grows into that which can face the challenges of the world forthrightly and accept femininity and the awakening that you gain from that into their lives.
And to accept the responsibility of protecting what that is, you know, that it's something to be protected, and that you have a responsibility as the archetypal masculine to do that.
Right, exactly. And that was what I was saying about the idea of lifeboats.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually is reinforced. What we were just talking about is reinforced because who helps her? Well, first this. I like this frame. It's hilarious. Yamcha, poor guy.
He's just terrified.
He's terrified
of that responsibility.
Well, and that's the thing. Women can be terrifying because you have to face up to your own shortcomings,
your own vulnerabilities,
and your own
fears.
And it's not just someone to take care of you. It's not just someone to take commands like Puar, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she challenges him, it's an immediate. I don't even want to think about that. Right, like that's embarrassing to me already.
Embarrassing is a good way to put it. Yeah, it's he is ashamed. You know, he is shamed by that. Right. Oolong's not though.
No, Oolong's beyond shame at this point.
Oolong just says, "Okay,
hurry up." He's done with it. They're trying to get out of there. He's more I mean, one thing we can say about Oolong is his preservation of self is high on his level of priorities.
I think that this points out the imbalance and the lack of integration. You know, and we're going to get to that integration towards the end of this episode. If we look at Oolong as an extension of Bulma, sort of her masculine element, this is to say that Yamcha still cannot embrace his own masculinity even as much as Bulma can. And that's why they cannot... how would I say... That's why he can't seem to come into what he wants. It's like she she can't respect his lack of masculinity because she almost inherently has it there.
See, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's a lack of masculinity on Yamcha's part. That's what you're saying?
Well, not a lack of masculinity, but a lack of acceptance of it. Because this is on a more meta level, right? And that's, acting like Oolong's not his own character, which is not true, but sort of extracting it out because we've talked about,
I mean, he is his own character, but he's also this part of Bulma.
Right.
And here we see, like, this is exactly this in a microcosm. What is happening in this picture? Picture's worth 1,000 words, right? This is what happens in a lot of those Disney stories where the masculine aspect comes and saves the princess, right? And it's not a sexist thing. It's that duality, right? Those two are the prince and the princess. Not saying Oolong. I mean, look at Oolong.
No.
But
yeah.
They're two sides of that same coin, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know that I think that it's Yamcha's inability to accept the feminine judgment is what's preventing him. I don't know if it's a lack of masculinity is what I'm saying. But I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, I don't think I worded it very well, but accepting the feminine judgment is definitely something because, I mean, we talked about Oolong getting the panties and wearing them upon his head and sort of what it could mean on a more meta level. And then now we see him, he's very forthright. He takes charge and he could just he could turn into a bird and just fly out of the situation, right? Instead, he helps Bulma here when Yamcha can't. And, that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that as an extension of Bulma, this is the imbalance. That Oolong needs to do it is why Yamcha can't have a girlfriend.
Right now.
Exactly.
And I wanna make a point about what we've been talking about the last couple of episodes with the panties representing the modesty of the female and how Oolong has now gained appreciation or respect for that. I think that is integral to his character, and that's why it doesn't persist. But he does grow in a marginal way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say.
I don't think it's important to Oolong. I just think it's important to the themes of this.
I don't want to say that he, as a character, his growth is insignificant, but at the same time, I don't think that it's part of the larger. And I think that's what we're.
If he wasn't the fool, it would be. But since he seems to be representing the fool, it's sort of like this is what the fool can say about the fledgling hero, who is Yamcha.
Yeah,
the fool precedes the hero, right? And in this sense. We see it immediately in
this is exactly in this episode.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, if you extrapolate that out to the next season, we see, we'll see.
We'll see.
All right. So let's go on. So the Pilaf gang, Pilaf and the homies. I want to consistently use that.
Pilaf
phrase
and the homies
possible.
is so good.
Pilaf and the homies. Decide to run away in a plane. It's significant, I think, that they choose a plane because the one arena in which Goku at the moment is lacking is that Logos. There's no Logos going on in Goku right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's grounded.
Absolutely. So why not fly amongst the stars where you're unreachable by your opponent, let's say?
Right, and they choose to do that to escape, but then there's that glimmer, right?
Right, and we'll get to that. So let's escape by plane. Just remember, not a few minutes ago, and in the English dub, it's pretty funny. He's like, I dreamt I was a bee and I was gonna sting someone. It's like just being a prick.
I absolutely love the dub of it because there's so many funny jokes with Pilaf that they're not going to come through in our analysis, obviously. But listening back to it, they have so much fun with Pilaf.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how could you not? When I was a kid, I thought he was useless, but now, man, Pilaf is such a good character. So
I also want to point out, I mean, just looking at this panel, it kind of reminds me, I say panel all the time because this reads like a manga whenever we try to take these images. I mean, there aren't a lot of shows where you could pull this much out of a single screenshot, and I think the reason that that's happening is because they're respecting the integrity of those panels. So that's why I keep saying panel. But Pamela. So the
Camel.
1-star the 1-star ball on his nightcap here, right? So I'd pointed out that he had the 1-star ball on his crown before, and that he wears it on his head.
In his vision.
But he's still wearing the 1-star ball on his head, specifically. Now, I don't think that's insignificant. Wearing something on your head in Dragon Ball so far has been pretty significant, right? You think of the Ox King wearing the blue feather on his head, right?
Or the goggles or any of that.
Or if you want to fast forward and just get your juices flowing on this, why does Gohan wear the 4-star ball on his head whenever he's out? Well why does he lose it from the top of his head?
My juices are already flowing on that one, my friend.
Not you. I'm talking to the audience.
Yes.
So wearing something on your head, representing something about the way you see the world. And, Oolong just got panties to wear on his head. So Pilaf is so oriented towards his self-image and what the 1-star ball represents to him mentally. He even wears it in his sleep. He wears it as a nightcap.
One wish, one ruler, one ego, right? The control, the tyranny.
The consolidation of power towards
it's also like the tyranny of the super ego, right?
Yeah, I just want to point that out.
Duly noted. And I think, it's a good panel to emphasize those things.
Especially because he thinks he's going to die and he's fleeing. It's like he's not embodying that idea in any way, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. He's doing all of the opposite things that it would take to properly secure what he desires. And so the initial reaction, right? The initial reaction is the honest reaction that Pilaf has. Not his ego forcing his will, tyrannizing himself, and those two, by the way.
And they're all in agreement right now, right? They're all having the same reaction.
And that's rare for the homies.
That's rare for the homies. Less rare for the other homies.
It's true. The other homies are about to... It's going to be great.
It's great. We'll come back to this. But I also want to point out the little missing tooth over there. We got the missing tooth coming up a bunch. And I want to call back to that later on. Because at first, it didn't seem like that big of a deal, the missing tooth. But it is very significant.
I'm going to make a note right now for our recap episode, Missing Tooth. I want to get all of them.
Tooth.
Just
right,
all
right
together.
Tooth. Yeah, it's funny here because it's like, I mean, Pilaf has already had the missing tooth, but you think about the situation that he's in. He's just lost. He's lost something very substantial to himself, and he's celebrating his ability to even survive in the face of that for just a second, And the ego hasn't even had a chance to respond to the situation that he's in.
Yeah, this is like the fight or flight adrenaline,
Literally flight.
Getting out of there.
I mean, fight or flight is a big theme of what's happening here, right?
No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
But pun intended. But right, so I think it is significant to note those things, and that's how you know that Pilaf is the antagonistic fool, which is not explored. Most of the time...
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Most of the time, you have either a strong villain, like Sauron or Saruman, right, in The Lord of the Rings, or you have a joke villain, right?
Sure.
Like, who's a good joke villain?
So what you're saying is
like
that
the Shredder or...
antagonistic fool precedes the true villain.
And that's why this as a full story is actually... transcends those ideas. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
I hadn't thought of that. The full analysis for Pilaf.
Oh, but we're gonna get there. That's just, I'm telling you, I have a lot of things to say.
Get there.
And I just want to note my analysis originally. I didn't even watch season 1.
we skipped it. We were like, it's all set up.
Well, even me, I didn't include season 1 in that when I was talking to you originally about like how good the show is. So I have a lot to say about the stuff coming up. That was my original
No, I'm
thoughts.
glad we're laying this groundwork because I don't have any of that, So I'm getting there now. I'm sort of getting that set up.
Yes, so the antagonistic fool. There he is. Unintegrated and not malevolent.
Mm-hmm.
Not fully malevolent in the same way that Oolong is not fully holy. Oolong can take holy actions, right?
Right. And Pilaf can take malicious actions, but he can't claim the responsibility for the malice in the same way that Oolong really can't claim the responsibility for that goodness as a concept or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that redemption, let's say, of the panties.
Yeah.
Redemption of the panties.
The redemption of the panties. Perfect.
Let's continue. So they're running in Bluma Falls, and you can see here, Yamcha is even hesitant to try and help.
But Oolong is not.
Right, and that's exactly why I grabbed this frame, and I hope you knew that, is because Oolong is already rushing ahead.
Right. It's that, well, we've set the groundwork in Yamcha's hesitance before, and Oolong didn't act immediately the first time. But now, Oolong has seen that Yamcha will hesitate and does what he needs to do, right? And so we can see that sort of that window closing a bit for Yamcha to be able to step in and be the masculine, right? It's like the more you hesitate, the harder it is to step in and embody that, because something else will step in. And in this case, Bulma's self-sufficiency will step in and leave you without an option.
Right, and I think that the fact that Oolong steps up is even saying that there are competitive masculine spirits who, even though you may discount them, I mean, he's a pig, right? The actions they take can...
Well, this is why the fool precedes the hero. He's being shamed by...
This is the critique, right? You're not doing this thing.
Yeah, a pig wearing a pair of panties on his head is taking the actions that you're too afraid to take.
I love Oolong. He's like such a good character.
It's great.
Oolong is amazing. But anyways,
Oolong rushes to help her, obviously.
But this next this next panel is going to exhibit exactly what you were talking about, how if that is not the case, then the archetypal female is not going to be helpless. They're not going to just say, "Oh, I'm helpless," which is some feminist analysis might indicate that, especially about, let's say, this show, which has a lot of criticism levied at its female characters.
Right.
But in the beginning, I would say not so.
I mean, look at her face.
She's had it.
Yeah, she's not happy with Yamcha's behavior.
And that's what will happen. And that's what has happened even now, is that when men don't step up, men in large don't step up to the responsibilities that is laid out to them and what is necessary for the archetypal female and the female at large to be successful and be able to cohabitate with those men, they will be upset and develop resentment towards those individuals. And that's what's happened now. Think about incel culture.
Oh, yeah, and that resentment
develops... They hate incels, right?
It develops a certain masculinity towards... well, not masculinity towards, but through developing that masculinity, it develops that resentment, and then it's sort of an imbalance,
You develop that masculinity, which is that disagreement, that disagreeableness, right? You foster those traits of disagreeableness, and eventually, you develop that resentment towards these... this group of people who are supposed to act, or who has acted, and it is best for them and you to act in a way that would benefit both of you, and they refuse.
That's what I kind of mean by that imbalance. It's sort of like...
Well, I mean, think about young men just choosing to play video games and not take any responsibility.
Right. Or claiming that the nature of their existence is such that it wouldn't be worth it because of the lot that they've been given to take that responsibility, because the deck has been stacked against them, XYZ, right? And that's what you're saying with the incel culture, right? I think we've seen that happen as a result of that imbalance.
And so basically what this episode is saying is like there's a moment where you're going to have to make a choice. Even as someone who's not been fully successful in integrating the feminine aspects into your idealized self, right? Someone who's unable to do that, incels, people who are unsuccessful with women, there's a line and here it is. You'll know when it's happening, right? And I think it's happening all around right now, and that's a big issue with the relationship between the two sexes at the moment.
I agree. I think that this is one of the main things that I think people need to learn this day and age from Dragon Ball, and that people don't respect that at all, and they think that Dragon Ball is a show just about beefy men beating each other up, and it just only has something to say about masculinity, and it's like...
People don't think it has to say something about masculinity.
Well,
people don't think it has to say anything at all.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that if it had anything to say whatsoever, it would just be a unilateral thing that essentially says masculine equal good, right?
Violence equal good.
Yeah, strong equal good.
All right, so let's continue. And here it is. The full ridiculing the... I don't want to say prince, but it is a princely status that Yamcha's acquired. Is like something that he's not quite there. Is he ready?
Go on.
And so it's a ridiculing here. And
right.
I want to hearken back to the first time they engaged. Yamcha terrified Oolong.
True. And now, look at him. Terrified by something that Oolong is not terrified by.
Yes. And so Oolong can recognize that he is higher on the hierarchy in this certain situation. He has to tell him, you shouldn't even be down there. Right? And this is something that I think it's prevalent in younger people now, is like, you've been given like X, Y, and Z such that you should be at a place where you're more integrated. Let's say, like, you have a good family, right? You have a good school, a good community system. I mean, maybe not right now because we're in COVID times.
Yeah.
But this is to say, like, I'm a pig with panties on my head and I'm trying to help.
Yeah. I'm a lying, shape-shifting, cowardly pig whose only wish was to get panties, and you can't even do this, and I can.
Right, exactly, and that's the thing. Like, and that's kind of what Dr. Peterson talks about, is like, you know that you're a worthless, like, a resentful, spiteful person. You know that, and you know that you can be better than that.
Right.
And that's what you have to do.
Well, not only that, you need to embody that you are better than that. Just knowing it's not enough, right? Because Yamcha considers himself above Oolong, but he's not embodying it here, right? And it's sort of the culmination of that. It's if you don't do that for long enough, the shame of not doing that will weigh on you, and it will take opportunities away from you, and it'll take your wish away from you ultimately.
And that's what would happen, I would ultimately argue, if Yamcha failed at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yamcha would go back to the cave, right? I can't touch girls.
This is so sad, dude. Look at this. This is exactly it. It's
compare that face to Bulma's face. I mean, if I want to talk about the imbalance.
No, that's exactly it. But it's an embodiment of the dynamic between the masculine and the feminine today.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
Oh, come on. Yeah, I think that we're seeing the sort of inversion of how things should be and the criticism of that. And this episode is about, well, we've had the legwork, but this episode is really about setting those things where they need to be so that we can move past the imbalance that this entire first season seems to represent. The
imbalance being a description, right? This is description and commentary, and that's not all art does that. Some art is simply commentary, right? Of theoretical things, theoretical themes. But there's other art that is descriptive and doesn't have as much commentary.
Right. You see that a lot with sort of ironic shit where it's like, oh, it's making fun of it, or it's quote unquote making a commentary by inverting it. It's like, no. It's a lot of the time it's not.
But what you need is that blend of both of them, and this is describing the dynamic and indicating the steps to overcome those challenges.
Right. It's not just describing the dynamic, and it's not just describing a potential other dynamic. It's walking you all the way through it and saying, like, this is how it could be, this is how it is, and this is how it could change. And that's what I think elevates it to something that people can actually take something away from.
Yeah, precisely. And I do feel kind of bad for Yamcha here. Look at him.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows that now's the time. There is real malevolence in the world, and when you encounter it, that's when you have to mature. If you choose not to, then you are back in the cave.
Yes. This is his motivation. This is like, the time has come. You can't wait around any longer. We need to get past this, or you're never going to get past this.
Right. And let's see what Yamcha does. He grits his teeth and he accepts his suffering.
Well, look at his teeth.
Where's the missing tooth?
No missing tooth now.
His eyes are messed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, no missing tooth, right? That flaw, that chink in his armor, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not there because he's finally accepted it. He's willing to forego himself for this, for the ideal of Bulma.
Yes, he's willing to embrace his own vulnerability in the face of the feminine gaze for the sake of something bigger than himself.
And thereby removes the flaw.
And by doing so, he regains his bite, so to speak.
Well, and it's not only that, but it's the vanity thing too, right? It's that flaw. The confidence can overshadow a lot of that, and I think that's something that young men need to understand.
Right. That the embodiment of that confidence supersedes
And
your own vain sort of inadequacies.
Sure.
Your lack of confidence.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe your hair, you don't like how your hair looks, or maybe you have acne, or maybe you're not tall enough. All those things, like, those can be overcome.
This is the thing that incels cannot accept. That the embodiment of that ideal is so much more powerful than any of that. And they tell themselves a story about that relationship so that they don't have to claim that responsibility. Because it's easier not to. Especially in our day and age.
Well, the story Yamcha was telling himself earlier, I'm going to steal these Dragon Balls, right? I'm going to just get this.
I'm just going to have it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the space that Yamcha was in was the typical incel space. He was secluded in a cave.
I wouldn't say typical. I would say it was a little evolved more.
Well, it was beyond
than incel. It was one small step beyond it.
It was a small step beyond it, but the space that he inhabited with his feminine aspect is sort of servile, just extracted out and unintegrated in a cave away from society. It's like,
where's my robot waifu?
Yeah.
Precisely that.
Mm-hmm. And this is the acceptance that, like, Poir is not enough. Right, I could run away, and it could just be me and Poir still. But like,
but Bluma is worth saving.
Yes,
women are worth the sacrifice, right? And that's another thing, because I think like MGTOWs, right? Men going their own way, saying like, I'm just not going to deal with women. Yeah, I think that's also the wrong way to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in places in my life too where it was appealing to look at that way of thinking, to say that that you don't need it. I mean, you kind of take that approach where you're like, I don't need a woman, I don't need affection, I don't need XYZ, and it's not about what you need.
Look at this. Like, how welcoming is this?
Right. I mean, how willing are you to
critical,
live with
judgmental,
that?
Right?
Yeah.
But there's another side to that, right? It's that self-fulfillment, that duality, partnership.
Oh, my computer's just about to die. Okay. You're going to lose a viewer.
One view. Let's get back to this. I just wanted to show Blooma's face there again to compare her agitated, judgmental, and critical face versus Yamcha's face of true struggle here. And so I think I've said my piece on this.
Yeah, I think we can go.
He does it, but there's the tooth. It was always there,
right?
But in the last, he was able to overcome it by taking that action, deciding to take that action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That you could say, when you take that action, your image of yourself does not reflect that.
True. And I actually want to relate this to a historical topic. Like, there are many men throughout history who have been able to be very successful, let's say, in their endeavors of reproduction. Those men weren't always the most attractive. I mean, think about how male pattern baldness was passed down. That's the exact way that it was the kind of...
Right. I mean, you could say that nobody these days would have it at all if people with it were not able to consistently, in mass, reproduce. So...
Right. Well, maybe not en masse. It depends. It passes down by the father for the most part.
I say en masse just because it's systemic, right? It's...
And what I'm wanting to say there is the deeds, these historical deeds of these people were what allowed them to be able to overcome some of those inconsistencies.
Right,
like
the strength of their character.
I mean, Charles the Bald, for example. French king. Pepin the Short. He was like 5'1", 5'2", something like that. Pretty short king compared to some of these kings. Like Charlemagne was like 6'3", 6'2". Giant god, Charlemagne the god. I'm a big fan of Charlemagne. Didn't want to get off on a tangent. But anyways, to continue on this, it's the overcoming of those flaws.
It's the acceptance of those flaws,
Through that acceptance of suffering and action of sacrifice.
Right. That's going to be a big theme, I think, throughout all of Dragon Ball too.
And we're going to get into that for sure. So it's a little bit of sunk cost fallacy, but it's also a little bit of the ego regaining control. And this is something that you had spoken
upon
about
reflection,
a second ago.
right? It's saying that upon reflection of the things that you've lost, your ego can assert itself again in an indignant way and say, through the sunk cost fallacy, that you deserve the thing you no longer have, even though it's your fault that you lost it. And that can push you further towards that unholy trinity.
And that's exactly it. It's the ability to reject reality so much so that you think that your ego will be powerful enough to shape the world around you.
Right, and that when it fails you, that it says nothing about you.
And it had shaped the world around Pilaf.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the destruction of that world, in which Pilaf is... There's no going back after that. After an ego destruction, ego death like that anyways, there's no going back after that.
Right.
So this is already futile just starting it.
Yeah, this is
And
a
I want to
backlash.
mention what it is that specifically destroys the castle of ego that was Pilaf's. It is the malevolence inherent in those who are good. The ability to harm by those that are good. That's what stamps out, let's say, the foolish antagonist. Is those who are forthright and after enough times, right? And we've seen that before. We'll see that in multiple instances later on in the show and in other instances of media. Let's say the casting aside of Honest John in Pinocchio, not to bring up too specific a point, but right, he is not as malevolent, right? He's cast aside by someone who is truly malevolent, right? Which this is the true malevolence of Goku. And I don't want to get too into specifically what it is. We'll come back to this because we'll come back to the Oozaru and how his castle was destroyed by not just what I'm talking about now with that embodiment of animalistic malevolence, but also
It's reality itself in a sense, right? It's the truth of your situation. It's the inevitable demise of your dishonesty to yourself that's being enabled by your ego.
But why is it Goku in his ape form that destroys it? That's what I'm trying to address.
I mean, do you want to get into it, or
I mean, how into it? I don't want to get into some of the later stuff, but I do want to get into how the idea of, we can use the shadow actually. So the idea of the shadow and manifesting that is destructive to the ego.
yes? I mean, it is the most destructive to the ego, right?
I think I had to just take a second to think about what I was trying to say. But right, that's what it is.
Well,
The shadow.
you could call this Pilaf's first encounter, real encounter with the shadow, right? It's sort of
With malevolence, and that's the kind of what I was
Yeah.
using interchangeably there.
well, it's like
Internal malevolence.
well, as Goku is right now, he's embodying the shadow for something outside of himself, right? He is the embodiment of that thing, specifically now for Pilaf to destroy that ego, and for Pilaf to have the opportunity to respond to that experience. What is he going to do in response to it? And we'll see that in probably in like 4 or 5 panels. Actually, no, it'll probably be like 10 panels, but even more.
Fewer.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of what's happening in this episode is to set up why the full, how do I want to word this? How it is that the foolish sort of unintegrated villain walks away from that to bring into the world something worse, right? We need to see Pilaf turn away from understanding that encounter with the shadow and not build something good out of it, because that encounter with the shadow is the potential for something stronger to be built on the foundation of what once was, right?
Almost always. Pretty
Yeah.
much in every instance of it.
But
so
it comes with a choice, right?
And the choice Pilaf will make here is to destroy the idea of the shadow. My ego is stronger than the idea of malevolence itself. So turn around.
Yep. He's basically saying that he is rejecting that idea so strongly that he wants to fight against it. And this is more intense than, let's say, Yamcha fighting against the ideas that Goku represented, right? This is self-destructive on a different level. To fight against the idea that the shadow represents, the idea that I might get too much into it if I really try to articulate this, but the idea that the reality of your situation is superseded by your idea of yourself is so destructive that you're left with essentially nothing if you cannot reconcile it. So we're seeing Pilaf right now just embodying that fight. He's like, you know what? He wants to lash out against it because also it's that indignant nature in his ego as well, that he's fighting for a castle that doesn't exist anymore. He's fighting for an idea that's already been defeated.
Yeah, like I said, there's no coming back from it anyways.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he decides to turn around. But meanwhile, the gang, the homies are safe.
The real homies.
The real homies.
I like this. Yamcha seems terrified at what he's done still.
But I also love Oolong's face. Like, please, what did I do to deserve this? He's about had it.
Yeah.
Puar's about had it. They're all at their end. Like, they're all at their wits' end.
Bulma, though.
But Bluma
is
actually quite awake. She looks vigorous. And she's pretty happy that this is what had come to pass, is that Yamcha saved her.
Well, I think you could say that this is
It's almost to say that's what women desire, is for men to pick up the suffering that they have and accept the responsibility that they should. And when that happens, they're not going to be upset like they were before.
Well, I also want to point out, too, that it's like, you think of Oolong and Puar as these extensions of these characters, sort of their unintegrated, more emotional aspects of themselves are both exhausted, while Yamcha and Bulma are wide awake and sort of invigorated by this experience, right? That's to say that it takes a toll on you to embody that and to do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's exhausting on that level. It's going to exhaust that element of yourself that you don't use properly, and that's not properly integrated.
Well, not to mention too that Puar and Oolong had the biggest role in the last episode. No? Was the last episode the Wish or the episode before?
I think it might have been last episode.
Is that a wish of the eternal?
I think it begins with the wish. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were really, really doing that part.
Right.
Because they're the only ones who could combat on the same level. We already addressed that.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and continue. Scrunch.
The realization. This is that place. I think this is a more archetypal idea. Just this is where you are when, after you have confronted something that you're truly afraid of, and you come out the other side, you are...
It's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all, but you're sort of laid low by your own previous assertions to yourself. And Yamcha is embarrassed and...
Surprised. And relieved.
And also, you can see it with his eyes, He's almost like... You think of, like, the faces that Roshi makes later on, right? Yeah, this is a very Roshi-like face coming from Yamcha. But yeah, it's you had mentioned before that it's great because you can convey so many emotions with it being animated all at the same time, and we're getting that from Yamcha. I don't know if like a person could convey these many emotions at the same time.
I don't know that a person could have 4 teeth and then simultaneously like just there's all your teeth back, and the audience would just be like, okay.
Yeah. But I mean, specifically with this expression, it's like there's a lot going on.
The teeth express an idea. Like that's the thing. These decisions that Toriyama made express ideas. That's why they're mythological. It transcends. It's holy art. It transcends that simply commentary or description.
Mm-hmm.
But right in here, and I also I like that Yamcha's hunched over in a kind of defensive position, right? Like protecting his internal organs there. He's like in a defensive evolutionary posture, not realizing yet, just processing that he's okay.
Right. He has not,
his physicality has not caught up with his logical analysis.
Right. I mean, that's what we're seeing happen right now, as he is putting it to a logical analysis.
And we'll see how the integration of that is able to conquer some pretty tough things in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But meanwhile, the Pilaf and the homies crew have started their assault on Goku. Anything you want to say about this, other than there's a bunch of mushrooms in which Pilaf could have gained insight but chose not to?
I mean, nothing that I haven't already said about the scenario that this represents. That he is launching an attack on that idea so that he doesn't have to accept what has happened, accept his own culpability for where he's gotten himself. Now, this initial attack on him has basically no effect. I mean, he's shielding himself, but these little, what? You say little, these are bullets from a plane, but they mean basically nothing. This is an attack from an elevated position, you could say from the Logos on the idea, not the idea, but, well, I guess the idea that Goku represents here.
Well, I would say it's the power of the Pilaf's Logos against Goku's shadow, which we can see how those match up.
Exactly, yeah.
The shadow of one righteous who's unintegrated versus the Logos of one who is almost unholy, right? It's like this. If any D&D players are out there, it's like a dwarven warrior with 10 wisdom deciding to become a cleric. It's just not optimal. And so what we see here is an ineffectual attack by Pilaf.
Right. I kind of like the design of the castle too. I'll point out that the castle is still somewhat standing. It hasn't fully been destroyed yet. And I like the design of it up on this. It reminds me of like Aztec.
It's a mound, yeah. I wouldn't say specifically Aztec because I'm about to get specific here. Like Inca, Maya, and actually Mississippi Native Americans and Southwest Native Americans, I should say American Indians, also use mounds like this.
Mm-hmm. But, just the idea of that it's a castle up on this mound.
Well, there's other. Actually, let me say too. There's other mounds specifically in sub-Saharan Africa that are still around, archaeological sites. Haven't found too many. They're more prevalent, I would say. Never mind. I'm getting off tangent. Go ahead. I'm just talking about history here.
I just like the idea of what this is. It's like
I agree.
He put it up on a mound,
it's on a
because
pedestal,
of his own Logos, right? And so he's like,
he put his own ego on a pedestal.
Yes.
Above the enlightenment that's all around him, the mushrooms.
Well, he tried to put it on the level of that enlightenment, but we see here it's like the mushrooms are above that mound,
Yeah. And so how does the shadow react when confronted with faux malevolence?
Just see more red, become angry.
It's almost too and I'll probably pull this up for the recap episode, the image of the coachman in Pinocchio. It's kind of that idea, like showing your true malevolence, right?
Mm-hmm. Or it's sort of like meeting that malevolence with your own show of malevolence, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you want to be tough. Let's go.
I'll show you what I believe to be tough.
And here it is. And so they're terrified. They got their eyes fully open. They're ready to die. They're going in still trying.
Yeah, they're just having the realization.
I do want to say
not
that
enough.
Right, and we kind of already talked about this. The reason I put this frame in was specifically to say that the faux malevolent Logos is infinitely ineffectual towards the righteous unintegrated shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So launch
the special
Pilaf
missile.
It's the special Pilaf missile. Launch it. Notice here, Pilaf has all his teeth.
So how would you analyze the special Pilaf missile? Because I don't really know what I think of it.
I mean, basically, the special Pilaf missile is the ultimate embodiment of the foolish antagonist, the antagonistic fool, or you could say the foe malevolent, right? It's the ultimate display of that, which is, and we're going to see how it plays out and how it's both descriptive and it's a commentary of how it plays out, and we're going to see, right?
Let's see.
But I did want to say it's named the Special Pilaf missile for a reason. It's named after him. It's an ego bomb, right?
Mm-hmm. This is sort of like, I'm going to focus all of my ego into one singular attack. This is like the most that I can do, right? I'm going to single-mindedly point my ego at this thing. And this is basically like, I'm going to convince myself as hard as I possibly can that I don't need to...
I don't need to face the portal of wisdom that is the moon.
Yeah.
The same way that Goku has.
Right. I don't have to face that idea that he's essentially embodying that and tearing down the walls of my ego, right? So this is saying, like, if I just convince myself hard enough, it's not true.
And so launch it. And it appears to incapacitate the shadow. Meaning your ego can repress your shadow.
Yes, but it will not.
And we're going to see.
It will not undo the effect that the shadow has had on your own ego, ultimately.
Well, and we're going to see too. Like, it can repress it. It can, let's say, put it to sleep. Right? It can soothe it. It can console it. All those things. And so that's what it is right now. Asleep. And you can see the plane flying overhead. Victorious amongst the stars where Goku is laid low. And now the castle's...
Yeah, now the castle's destroyed.
Pretty much destroyed.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this?
No.
Let's continue. That's what you get for acting to Mickey.
That's right, Goku. So, this it's like the one moment that Pilaf has to feel like he has succeeded. He's like, aha, I've won. He hasn't looked around yet. He hasn't analyzed his own position yet. He hasn't internalized where he is as a character yet.
Not only that, but he hasn't addressed the fact that the shadow is not so simply undone as by simply an explosion of ego, let's say.
Sure.
And so, right, here it's still a tantrum. This is still the ego acting out, right?
Right, and specifically going after the tail, right? The tail being this sort of the thing that connects you to your bestial nature ultimately. He lashes out at that. You know, he's not... I mean, he, like, kicks his hand or something, but this is more important because...
That's the main point, right? I didn't put the hand kicking because...
Yeah.
Archetypically, it's not important.
But this, the attacking the tail and sort of as an act of dominance over the ego, it's like, aha, see, I win. It's an attack of dominance on the shadow by the ego. And why wouldn't it do that?
Right, exactly, it would. Because the ego is self-aggrandizing. And the ego is self-flagellating, let's say. Right? Yeah.
Which, of course, immediately reawakens the
shadow, right. Of course it would. He would have stayed asleep longer had that not happened.
I mean, this is just another case of Pilaf not accepting the responsibility that...
I guess we can do that. Explain shadow.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we could.
Go ahead.
So the shadow is the aspect of the self that represents, how would I put it? Carl Jung has described the shadow as the darker elements of the self that, when integrated, they fully realize you as a person. So you could say that a younger person, a child, an infantile person has not integrated their shadow because they have not confronted the evil within themselves. You know, I think it's something that that Dr. Peterson has talked about quite a bit in his progress. I think he talks about it a lot in his book Maps of Meaning at the beginning, that he comes face to face with his shadow, with his dreams that he's having, and he doesn't know what to do about it for a long time. And the integration of that shadow is acknowledging the inner daemon. It's sort of coming into that balance with yourself where you accept the potential malice, you accept the potential evil. It's about accepting that what happened in Nazi Germany was done by real people, and that you are also a real person. You're not physiologically different from those people, and that you have that potential within you. So you accept that, and you accept that you have a certain moral standing by not acting upon it. It gives you a firmer place to stand in the world if you understand that you're making a decision not to be that way, but that you have the potential within you to be that way. And so...
Right, it's the idea of those who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed.
Right,
will inherit the world.
That is what it means when the Bible says the meek shall inherit the earth.
And that's a Petersonian analysis, but right. And I think you did well in describing the shadow. It's basically that. It's the acceptance of
the evil in man.
Right.
The evil that comes within self-consciousness.
And that's in you.
Yeah.
That's in you, right.
Well, it's the dawn of self-consciousness, right, is that this hurts me, therefore it hurts somebody else.
Right. And so this is Goku's shadow, meaning, right, this is Goku's manifestation of the damage that he could do if his full force was exerted in that direction.
And that's why the moon represents a portal to that wisdom, the wisdom of all of your potential malice and I don't want to say evil because evil is a bit more complicated, but
it's not evil. Not yet.
All
it's
of the damage
malice
and havoc that you could wreak on the world, all of your potential destruction, sort of.
Right. Evil goes into the destruction of ideas itself.
Right.
Malice is simply against being.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we see this castle exists, therefore Goku destroys it.
So yeah, I mean, with that reading, sort of with a bit more context, it may make a bit more sense why Pilaf is sort of the villainous fool, right? Because he cannot accept the existence of the shadow. He has not integrated his own shadow, and he can't act out those malicious things. He just wants to have a claim to them.
Well, there's other villains who are possessed by their shadow. And there's other villains who actually do integrate their shadow, and we'll see how that turns out. And that's why this show is so amazing, is because we see all these different characters, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's just the next more powerful villain. It's like, no.
They're ideas.
It's the next more dominant hierarchy amongst the sea of meta hierarchies and the hierarchy of hierarchies that exists in our reality. It's not just, here's the next stronger villain.
Right, I mean...
It does get that way. Hey, Super, I'll agree with you. That's exactly... Like, Jiren is
right.
no
and
mythological
that context
analysis.
and I'm still working on it myself, but that's an inkling of what's going on with Saiyans as an idea.
Oh, I have a lot to say about that, but we're not going to get into that yet. No. Don't even bring up the Saiyajins yet.
We will bring it up a little bit later on just because of a funny joke. But
we may bring up... Yeah, there's one particular frame we'll bring up, the Saiyajins.
But yeah.
Saiyajins.
But hopefully that was a decent enough explanation of the shadow.
And so the shadow's like, well, I'm going to use the destruction I've made, right, to wreck the logic or the logos that you're trying to exhibit upon me.
I think it's even more than that. He is throwing his own ego back at him.
Right, the destruction of his ego, the destruction he's made.
How do I want to put it?
Maybe I didn't. Maybe I wasn't.
Well, Pilaf thinks that he can rely on his logos to escape from this.
Escape and destroy.
Right. Well, it's like, okay, well then I can just abandon the shattered remnants of sort of my own ego that's been built up, and just leave it all behind, and then I'll just be free. And the shadow says, no, I will literally throw that ego at you and ground you again, right? The fact that your ego has been shattered is enough to drop you out of the sky and ground you.
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Kind of what I'm trying to get at.
You're no longer able to utilize the logos when your ego has been shattered.
Yeah.
And so the shadow in this instance is making that apparent. Bam. Kaboom. Zoom. Oh my gosh.
Boom, bam.
Boom, bam, Sam. So I just wanted to go through those real quick. Those were just like, so the audience knows what's going on. And we see all these mushrooms about, and Oolong with his panties running away from the wreckage of Pilaf's ego and the damage that one's ego can do to those around them unknowingly, right?
Right.
The unknowing ripples of the decisions you make.
Yeah, that when it is the dissolution of that ego has consequences on everything that it touches.
And it's about to touch down on Oolong. But we see Pilaf and the homies are completely grounded and left without any recourse at this point.
Right, they have no claim to the logos, they have no claim to the ground. They are now where they belong, here beneath the mushrooms. Underneath the enlightenment, they still have not accepted, or that Pilaf has not accepted.
It's more Pilaf.
I say they, but I mean it's
the homies that haven't made. I mean, the homies are usually right. They're like, "Hey, let's not do this thing." In fact, earlier, I think it's Mai that asks Pilaf to reconsider going back to fight Goku as the Great Ape.
Yeah, Mai being the more integrated aspect than say Shu, right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's just a plot point, and there's one tooth there for Pilaf in his jammies still.
He's been laid low enough that his image of himself is that he has basically no bite.
No bite. He has there's no recourse left, and it's really illustrated there. And you can even see with Shu, earlier we saw, and I don't know if I can, let me see how far back I'd have to go. Yeah, way too far. Way too far. I was going to say earlier we saw with Shu very long and prominent canines on the bottom and the top.
Mm-hmm.
That bite, that ferociousness, let's say. But now it's all blunted and he's pretty laid out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But let's continue there. I wanted to say this, how being trapped under the ego has reduced Bluma's vision.
I'll have to take a second on that one. Because I kind of interpreted this situation as more of the causal sort of nature of it, but I didn't really think about specifically that it's sort of this physical manifestation of the ego comes down and traps Bluma, and then it's up to.
And why would it trap Bluma? What did she just go through?
Well, she was just saved by the fledgling hero.
Right.
And so that would convince her that she is of a high enough status that demands a certain level of self-importance, at least to her.
So she would be most susceptible. It's why it's Bluma. It's not because it's the damsel in distress. It's because Bluma is most susceptible at the moment to the pitfalls of the ego. And if you remember in the last time we were with the Dragon crew, Yamcha had like thrown her to the side and she just like blushed at him and like looked at him, right? Like that ego had been taking over from her basic necessities, which are like to survive, and in this instance her tunnel vision has kept her from doing so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's a pretty astute analysis on it. And I mean, also just the situation she's in, right? And this is, again, returning to this idea that, okay, Yamcha, are you going, again, to embrace your responsibility? Now, the archetypal feminine has been trapped in... has been limited by and is trapped by a manifestation of that ego. Can you defeat that ego?
And we'll see if he can.
Nope.
Can't.
It's too heavy. Too heavy of a burden to lift on his own.
Right. The burden of Bluma's ego is too heavy for him to lift.
Bulma's sort of inherited ego, right? Because it's not her ego. It's like the ego that has shown up.
Well,
in this,
well,
at this
I mean,
moment,
think
right?
about it. It is the deceit and arrogance, the same way that it was a castle of deceit and arrogance that had been for Pilaf, and it's the shadow that has caused that to happen for Bluma, meaning that it is the propensity for that malevolent action that has caused her ego to reveal itself in this way, in this manifestation, which is the tower here, because it's the same idea, sharing that deceit and arrogance that Pilaf had undergone to create the castle in the first place.
Mm-hmm,
She's created her own here.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I don't even think I have anything to say on that. Like, that's basically it. Like, as I'm thinking about it, like, yeah, it's funny too, just because. And we'll see very quickly this shift in power, it's almost comical in Dragon Ball, but it's like right now, Yamcha can't do anything about it for like the next 2 minutes.
Well, there's a reason, I think, for that as well, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I'll let you go on this one. I mean, I just put this in because it's hilarious.
No, it's just this is such a great meme face.
I love Oolong, dude. I just love Oolong. He's such a good character. I'm so sad that, like, have you even seen him in Super? Does he have a line in Super? Can you name
He's
one
probably
line?
in the background every now and then.
Can you name one line of his in Super?
Nope, not one of them.
Chat, can you name one line? I don't think you can. Anyhow, so right, to Oolong, it's very apparent at this moment that the shadow, the propensity for that malice in people, coming straight for him, right? And you can be engulfed by the shadow, but in this instance, they're going to try and run away, which is the first reaction, right?
Yeah.
To flee the shadow rather than confront it and consolidate it, because it's a pretty powerful thing.
I mean, it's a terrifying thing by its
very
very
person,
existence.
right? As a person, like, the first time you confront the shadow is not going to be the first time you conquer it.
Right. It by its own definition is something that will terrify you.
And it's
period.
Terrified Oolong.
Yeah.
Oolong here, who is probably the most developed of our main cast.
I think that he has the most respect for the damage that it could cause him.
Absolutely. And so that has awakened Yamcha to strength he didn't know he had.
I love the little, like, chunk of a tooth missing here. It's like, he's not quite enough, but he's trying.
And that's the thing. It awakens that strength. People are smarter than they think. People are stronger than they know. When that adversity comes, right, that's when you'll step up to the plate, and it's do or die in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Right. Being crushed by the shadow. Crushed by the weight of your own ego and your propensity for malice. That's what Bloom was facing at the moment, because she, unlike most of our other cast, is, I would say, still the most consumed by arrogance.
Very self-centered, very conceited.
Sure, I mean, think about what she was just doing. The reason she got hit by this in the first place, because she's fawning over Yamcha.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so Yamcha's strength awakens.
Well, I would say
when
it's not
when
just
necessary.
fawning over Yamcha. It's sort of like ruminating on the fact that Yamcha would pay her that sort of
and
attention.
relishing in the fact, because she hasn't even realized it yet, and we're gonna see what it is later.
Mm-hmm.
But it is relishing in the fact that she has this
That
sway over Yamcha.
that her value has been validated, right? That her image of herself has been validated by that embodiment that Yamcha's put out there, right? And it's like, yeah, that is a very dangerous position to be in, because you can be crushed under the ego when that happens, and you need, I mean, generally you need someone to bring you out of that.
And like I was saying earlier, it is that prince-princess relationship in early Disney movies, in which this is the aspect of the Logos that's able to reason their way out of the ego and save Bluma from the fate. Except she doesn't really get saved. I mean, she gets lifted out of that, right? But the shadow is still present. The rest of the crew runs. But Bluma, poor Bluma, is caught up.
She is in a position where she could be devoured by the shadow.
Devoured by her own propensity for malice.
Right.
That's what that is.
And because it's unintegrated, right? Specifically because she has not confronted it, and she hasn't accepted it, and she doesn't understand it. And again, it's like Goku doesn't exist in this, right? This is all about everyone's relationship now to the existence of the shadow as such.
Well, also, it's not just that. It's a particular shadow. Other shadows, and we're going to see, other shadows do look different than this.
Right.
Goku's shadow is so powerful because it's that idea of Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings saying that I would take the ring with the idea to do good, but through me it would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what it is.
It's that idea.
That's why Goku's so powerful in his shadow form, let's say. Because like I said, we're going to see other embodiments of the shadow. One particular in pink that I'm thinking of, who are not nearly as powerful as Goku because of that.
Yeah, this is it. This is the culmination of this situation, right? Because if this cannot be confronted and reconciled now, what Bulma is on the line. And what Bulma is the archetypal feminine. You know, she is that which needs to be protected because of its value to humans. Right?
And we don't even need to get into like, what would happen if Bulma died in season 1? Oh, subscribe to my content.
What it would mean is that it is never reconciled, and the masculine and the feminine are never actually integrated, and then Goku ultimately doesn't get to go on his journey, so to speak.
But that's not the case, because guess what? All you young people, even you older people out there, like anyone that's like under 40, you had that integration of the masculine and feminine spirit. It was there, and it's completely disintegrated. It was there in evidence of this culture that was created during the 80s and the 90s when it was there. And at this point now, it's totally disintegrated. It's
been assaulted with a sledgehammer.
It's a message. Well, it's been assaulted by a tyranny, a castle that we've been placed in. And now we're all in our own castles. And outside are all these enlightenments, all these mushrooms. And we're all peel off right now.
It's just a bunch of castles surrounded in razor wire now. It's like, oh, you want to go get the enlightenment. It comes at great peril to the self.
Precisely. Anyway, so let's move on here. I'm gonna go get a drink. Do you want a drink?
Yeah.
What
You want to take a minute?
Take just a quick second.
Give me one of those that you just had.
Okay. I'll be right back.
But yeah, I'll vamp a little bit. I think that the situation that we're in is that in this more traditional situation we're looking at, it's a situation that the fledgling masculine can do something about. It's something that the story was trying to tell people, like, this is the position that you're going to be in, and you can make this decision, and you can integrate in this way, and you can grow in this way. And I don't think that where we're at on a societal level supports that as much. And I think that coming to understand what Dragon Ball is trying to say about culture and about psychology and about our responsibilities in the world, if you can come to understand that, then maybe you can come to understand what has gone askew culturally over the past, I would say, 20, 25 years. I think it's something that is missing, and because it's missing, we can't see it quite so easily. So you look at something like this, and it's kind of a reminder. It's like, hey, this is what you're not seeing. This is what it's not evident to you inherently. You need to look at things like this to remind you what's missing, the call to the self that you don't get on your daily basis now.
Yeah, precisely. And it's a prescription and medication for the ills that face society at this point.
That's good.
I know, right? So I do want to mention, I think on Brok's channel, which we're going to start plugging, we're going to do some beer reviews soon.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that that's inevitably happening. I just don't know when. I need to get my setup going. There's a whole thing about that, but once I do, it's going to have to happen.
Yeah, because I mean, we live super close to a bunch of breweries. We're going to see some special brews. And
assuming we get to keep having these brews.
Yeah, I know, right? I would be down to like bring some equipment and stream there. And I mean, maybe not all this setup, but like,
I want to build a whole setup. It's going to happen eventually.
A mobile suit setup. All right. Anyways, yeah, let's get back on track. All right, we had a little break there. So this is the first Brok panel I think that we have. That was my last one. Was the last one. So
right, we typically split the episode in half, and
we go over it and we compare some things. But I'm gonna let Brok take over on leading most of the discussion on these, and then I'll respond to what he put in.
Here specifically, Puar is reminding Yamcha of Goku's weakness being his tail.
Why is that?
Puar was the one gazing up at the moon when all of this started. And Puar has a certain respect for the role that the shadow plays.
Well, actually, let's say this. What's Yamcha afraid of?
Women.
Because?
That which you seek lies where you fear to look the most.
But why is Yamcha afraid of women?
Why is Yamcha afraid of women? Because, well, if I want to boil it down to one sentence, why is Yamcha afraid of women? It is his vulnerability that he needs to come into acceptance of in order to grow as a person.
Because his vulnerability will be judged.
Right. It is the feminine gaze
now,
upon him.
The feminine gaze discovers what? Weaknesses. So what happens here?
The feminine gaze points out to him the weakness in the shadow.
And that's the usefulness as well. I think that particularly men that don't appreciate the perspective of women may benefit from knowing that the feminine gaze does elaborate and elucidate weakness that you can then improve upon.
Right. This even points out the weakness in the strongest thing that they've ever seen, right? As a concept. It's to say that, like, okay, the shadow is this all-powerful thing, at least at this point in the story, but The feminine voice in Yamcha's head points out to him the shortcomings even in that, and says, because that's what the feminine gaze does for Yamcha, right? And gives him not only the knowledge, but the tools to approach it.
The tools. And we're going to get into the tools in just a minute. I liked how you used that word. Perfect.
But of course, Yamcha thinks,
I know one tool. Here's my tool.
it's my Wolf Fang Fist. So, we haven't been paying as much attention to chat.
Okay.
You want to read that out for me? Because I can't see it from here.
Yeah. Oh. So when we were talking about Super, Chris Somber says, I don't think he is. Maybe he is at Bulma's birthday party. So in Super.
I assume he's there. Everyone's
There's
there.
a deleted scene where Beerus nominates Oolong to stand against him to save everyone. Beerus says he looks the most delicious. Oolong says he wants my bacon. Beerus, I love Oolong. Oh my gosh, Oolong's amazing. Beerus actually challenges the rock paper scissors Oolong to contest because he sucks paper rock scissors. Then Yamcha goes Oolong and loses. Yeah, I don't remember that very much.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
I do. I'm glad you brought it up because it isn't to say that Toriyama's completely forgotten about Oolong.
Well,
like,
Toriyama has a hand in Super. It's just,
let's say some other characters who are much more tragically forgotten. Do you like Breakfast? Because what comes after it's just gone now.
I don't want to talk about it right now. It'll make me sad.
Wolfang Fist.
So he's got his Wolf Fang Fist. This is the solution. This is okay. So let's talk about what the Wolf Fang Fist is.
Always the solution.
Well, specifically, remind me what the Wolf Fang Fist is, by your analysis.
By my analysis, the Wolfang Fist is the manifestation of Yamcha's idea of power into the reality of the world, meaning that his idea of power being speed, right, precision, those things, not
aptitude,
necessarily righteousness, forthrightness.
No, this
honesty.
is his. I would say it's his assessment of his current level of aptitude as a masculine spirit.
Well, actually, if you look at, and it's not just Yamcha, I do want to mention, if you look at the signature moves of characters throughout the series, it actually tells you what exactly that character values most. That's why it's significant that Goku uses the Kamehameha throughout the entire series, because what Goku values most is the Logos, the ability to speak truth into the world and thereby create order from chaos. Yamcha's idea of power is not that.
It's his own prowess, right? His idea of
his own
prowess.
skill, right?
Yeah.
It's that idea, and we have there are people that we know, let's say, that may think that skill or prowess in a particular field is able to propel them beyond anyone else.
Sure.
Which is not subjugating you to the hierarchy that is inherent in subordinating yourself to the field itself.
I wanted to get all of that groundwork laid for what Yamcha's about to do here.
But hold on, because there was something I was getting to there.
Go for it.
Subordinating yourself to that field, right? Which in the next season, we're going to see choices of subordination. We're going to see who Yamcha subordinates himself to, and we're going to see who Goku subordinates himself to.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I haven't even thought much about that, but yeah.
It's super tied together. The attacks they use are not just like, here's a cool little gimmicky attack, because we're going to see also Tien Shinhan, what he uses as his ultimate attack is what he values most at the time.
Well, we'll get there. I don't have any thoughts on Tien yet.
And Pickle, like, don't even get me started on that.
You say Pickle, all I see is that Oni frame of him going by.
I love
as
it.
a pickle.
So, right. Yamcha's reliance on his own skill, his own prowess, his ideas of power being precision and ferocity, right?
Right. Now, that's to say that what he's doing now is he's trying to hype himself up and convince himself that his prowess and his power is enough to confront the masculine. And how does he do that?
This is a wrestler who is very flashy, and I want to say everything is wrestling. So this is a wrestler who's very flashy and like very focused on their own skills and their own wrestling technique.
This is a wrestler who buys into his techniques too.
Right. And whereas Goku is the wrestler who is able to tell the truth, and I mean specifically like not like John Cena, but the truth like Stone Cold Steve Austin, who would like
Stone Cold
tell the truth about the mismanagement behind the scenes, and he would break kayfabe, like stuff like that. That is what I'm talking about with that devotion to truth, right?
Is wrestling.
Everything is wrestling.
Now, I wanted to say that because of what he's doing here. How he's using the Wolfang Fist is brilliant to me. I mean, I forgot about this until I rewatched it just now. I was like, oh, it's beautiful. Right?
Go on. Let's hear it.
Well, let's roll
forward. Or do you want me to go forward? Okay.
Because he uses his Wolfang Fist.
Oh, I see. Yes.
To craft something out of this ego. He creates a weapon out of this ego to represent what he believes to be a malicious sort of thing, right? Because we've talked about bladed weapons and sort of malice and wielding that malice.
His idea of it, yeah.
And so he thinks that through using his prowess and his interpretation of his own power, he can create a weapon out of his ego. Because I said he's a wrestler who buys into his techniques. He's a wrestler who buys into himself.
He can focus his ego,
and he thinks that that's enough to defeat what is happening right now, which is the potential devouring of Bluma by the shadow.
Right, exactly.
But he is unable. Now
he creates this bladed weapon here that looks very similar to the sword he used in the beginning.
But this one is literally crafted out of a construct of the ego.
Right, and that's significant. And you also see the mushroom.
Right. Just there in the background mocking him for the enlightenment that he doesn't really have.
Well, and also I want to say that we've seen this exact clash before. We already know that this isn't going to work.
Right.
If we've been paying attention, we've noticed that the ego of Pilaf has been unsuccessful in conquering the shadow.
The shadow just started ripping this thing apart. And this is the first time that Yamcha's even been able to break any of this up. Now, remember, he was punching the wall like an episode ago and couldn't do anything to it.
That's true. That's true. Although it is in a smaller chunk because it is not all of Pilaf's constructed castle. Right. This is made from Bluma's.
What Bluma has inherited.
Right.
But yeah.
And so he tries and fails to cut the tail, the weakness. And by the tail, it is the connection that Goku has to the shadow by his inheritance.
Ancestry.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It is.
And we'll talk about the shadow of Saiyajins later.
I like to think of the tail as sort of a thread leading back into the ancestry. And so this is sort of like trying to cut that thread. This is trying to sever that tie to something that is so primordial and so powerful that it's rooted in all of sort of the malice of humanity through the ages, right? It's like something that I can use my own prowess to craft as an egotistical approach is enough to sever that, and it's just obviously not. It's not
right.
enough.
It's the same thing as someone saying that their ego, their will in the world is enough to sever people's ties to the ideas of their ancestry, even those that are not. Well, we're gonna. I don't want to spill the beans quite yet.
But yeah, insofar as this scene goes, like, that's what's happening with Yamcha, you know.
Right, and it fails
failing here.
Just as the special Pilaf bomb fails. Special Pilaf missile fails.
Well, it's important, too.
Oh.
I don't know if I have a panel of it. Well, we can roll forward. So everyone jumps onto the tail because at least they recognize it as a weakness, right? They recognize that this is the thing that ties Goku to the shadow, to the enlightenment of the moon, right? And so they just latch onto it and that's the best they can do. It's all they've got, really.
It's all they have right now, right? The best thing they can do is cling on to the weaknesses of the shadow.
Right. And by doing so, something significant happens. By confronting the shadow is, how do I want to describe this? So I knew that I needed to get a panel of the blue aura around Oozaru.
It's that pacification. You can pacify the shadow.
Not even just that. Okay, so the Kamehameha is also a blue glow to it. And I think that
a glue blow
to it is sort of this acceptance of truth, or it's reflective of that, right? They are now confronting the shadow, and through doing so, an enlightenment is actually occurring, right? And that's why this blue glow is happening around Oozaru, I think, because it's similar to what happens with the Kamehameha. It's like, I don't know if it's necessarily just a specific thing. It's just thematically there. I don't know.
It is an enlightenment in a way to say, Goku would be aware of his own weakness at this point, and I don't think after this that his tail is cut off again, ever.
I don't remember.
It isn't.
It's not then.
I'm pretty sure. So aware of weaknesses, so that consciousness is there. I also want to mention too that when you, or it is said in the text here, that when you address and focus on the weakness of the shadow, that shadow will, like we said, facing the shadow, will become less malevolent. More
through
and you can integrate. Like
truth.
look the expression right now on the face. I don't know. Is it truth?
What I mean by truth, so truth being reality, being like the reason that the Kamehameha is speaking magic words in the world to create order from chaos, it is tied to this idea of the inevitability of the acceptance of truth and what comes with that. It's sort of this thing that sets things right, so to speak. And I want to apply that to this blue glow.
Okay. But I would say the jump I'm trying to get to there is how is it exactly affecting? But I think what you're trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the integration of those aspects and the acceptance into society, because that's what Goku has been going through in this season, is what allows that is what allows people to overcome the propensity for malice that they have.
Yes, I want to say it is. I brought this up earlier, and we keep coming back to Dr. Peterson here, but I think that's because he does a lot of work around the shadow. But this is the acceptance, right, that you have within you.
Unconscious, by the way.
Yes, unconscious acceptance.
But still acceptance.
The acceptance that you have within you the potential to do the things that are the most evil things that have ever happened. And that is a harsh truth.
And it'll stun you.
Yes.
When you figure it out. And that's what's happening here. I think that's where we're getting to.
I'm using the word truth, and it's like we got to get there, but that's what I mean. It's a harsh truth in the nature of your ancestry too. The ancestry pointing back to the most malicious actions that have ever been taken out.
And what they've done. What your ancestors have done for you to survive to begin with.
Now, the logical element of let's say the fledgling hero, right, and what is happening with Yamcha just clinging onto it with everything that he's got onto that tail, is where that acceptance of that truth sort of becomes instantiated. I think it is saying that confronting that harsh truth, confronting that harsh reality about the world, is something that can pacify the shadow. And that's something that Peterson talks about at the beginning of Maps of Meaning. If you remember, he talks about the harsh dreams that he was having as he started to confront his own shadow, right?
Yeah.
And how once he started to understand what it meant, then it receded back.
And that's what it is, a recession right here. And so that recession allows for the feminine spirit of Puar to
sever that connection.
and be a tool of the will of Yamcha, because Yamcha is the one that says to do
And this is the way that you do pacify that and begin, I'm not saying fully integrate, but begin to integrate that shadow into yourself. And we'll see what happens once you start to do that.
Yeah, we will. And I just want to mention here that it is it's even the unrealized feminine version or feminine being of Puar that is able to sever the connection. Because what can sever you from your ancestry? What has severed young men through the past from their ancestry? And that is the creating of their own family, the creating of their own path forward. Think about the people, let's say, who came to the New World from Europe, right? They left their families behind, and in a large part, those people have become separated from their own kin. Me, for example, like, I'm an example of that, right? Like, I know that my family comes from northern Spain, southern France area, but since my family migrated here, there's a branch off, right? And what happened there was their desire to create their own life, their own family, to embody and integrate both masculine and feminine to go create a new life somewhere else, a new Eden somewhere else.
I'll take that even a step further and talk about my own personal situation.
Whoa.
Which is that you need to separate yourself from that ancestry. You need to sever that ancestry to integrate that shadow to an extent by which you empower yourself and you set the masculine and feminine where they belong. That I think I've unconsciously embodied that in separating myself from my own support structures more recently in my life. You know, I've leaned on my family and always kind of used them as a tool to not really take on the levels of responsibility that I needed to in my life. And when you separate yourself from that, and how do I want to word this? Whenever you separate yourself from that, you take on a level of responsibility that is sort of almost noble, I guess. And I think that's why after this happens, then Yamcha is able to stand up truly and get his wish.
I agree. And there's more. I agree. I was muted there. And there's more we have to say about Oozaru, and we'll get to it, especially in the tournament. And then Pickle, we'll talk about it. And then, oh my, once Raditz gets here.
And Hogan.
Oh, God, Hogan.
Snip,
snip, snip, snip, snap. This is that severing, like we just said. And it's actually very important for this to happen to Goku at this time. Dragon Ball not only says and comments on what is proper to do and what is improper to do, but in the order in which you should do them.
Yeah, the causality is so powerful.
And that's the thing. It's not just, let's fight the next strong guy. I'm so upset about that analysis. But here, snip, snip. Anything else you got to say about those?
Nope. This is more for story's sake.
Boom.
I
Back
love
down.
This shot. Just it kind of reminds me of, you know, you look at a textbook and you look at the evolution of monkey to man.
It's like a shadow.
Yeah.
It's like
it's literally a shadow too, but
yeah.
But also it kind of reminds me of, you know, the sort of progression where you see like the ape standing upright. It's sort of an inversion of that here, right? And I think they did that on purpose, just to make another little reference to our relationship to our ancestry.
Well, yeah, it's the reverse of that. If you don't respect and integrate the malevolence of the past, then you're going to end up just like the bestial nature of them, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree. There's the tail. He turned back to normal.
More for story's sake than anything. I think we've talked about what it means that he has returned back to normal.
And we talked about the tail. Yeah, I think we've addressed this.
Mm-hmm.
This, the only option, and look at that. A mushroom right there above it all.
Right. The only option is to rebuild from scratch. Is the wisdom
It's right there.
that mushroom represents.
It's almost on the third. Like on our screen, it is on the third right here.
Yeah.
But like it's almost the focal point of the shot is that it is the wisdom. We have to rebuild from scratch.
Exactly.
And how do you react to that?
Well, if you're Pilaf, you run away.
Are you resentful? And do you say, I don't want to do that? Why do I have to do stuff like that? Right? Why do I have to face my own mistakes?
This sucks.
That castle took me years to build. That's exactly it, right? And look, you can still see mushrooms pleading, the universe pleading with Pilaf to understand his mistakes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about mushrooms and why we keep talking about mushrooms and why they represent enlightenment? Now that we're here at the end of the season, because I don't know if we're going to see mushrooms a whole lot after this.
We're not. So okay, I'll go ahead and dive into the stoned ape theory. So there's a theory that the let's say Australopithecus during the coming down from the trees period of our ancestry and evolutionary psychology, let's say, or evolutionary theory, traveling across the plains, finding mushrooms. There were a few types of mushrooms, ones that would, feed you, ones that would heal you, ones that would poison you, and ones that would send you on a spiritual journey if eaten in the right way. Now, that is to say that deep within our own psychology, mushrooms have been closely related to that. The enlightenment, let's say, of Santa Claus being a mushroom, and Santa Claus is a mushroom.
Yes.
And let me just briefly touch on that. What is it called? Amanita muscaria mushroom, the red and white toadstool mushroom, grows under Christmas trees, is eaten by reindeer, looks like the wrapping paper of presents, right, during winter, and will send you, let's say, or allow you to commune with a different mode of being that's alien to our current perception of reality. In which many people say there are elves.
True. I also want to point out on a sort of neurochemical level what's happening with mushrooms also. Whenever people take mushrooms these days, what is happening is there are limiters in our brain chemistry that tell us what's meaningful and what's not meaningful. We use it to filter out what's important about a thing.
Good approach. Go ahead.
We use those limiters to filter out what's important about a thing and what's not important about a thing, right? Like, you think about how many threads are in the sock you're wearing, for instance. You don't know, right? It's a large number. It's an indeterminate number. Whenever you take these mushrooms, it removes those inhibitors, and you find the meaning in things that the limiters typically don't allow you to see. Now, the number of threads in your sock, not that meaningful. However, there are things about the world that are very meaningful that you don't interpret until you're into that mindset, and those limiters are drawn back.
Well, I wanted to say that's how I was going to relate it to Santa Claus. Is that Santa Claus represents that idea that we can value and find a meaning in good things against our normal evil and selfish natures, right?
Right. It's about giving. It's about wholly good actions.
Right. And that idea, right, is from that confrontation with the ego that you have when you take psychedelic mushrooms, because that induces ego death. Pilaf's unwilling to kill his ego, and therefore he cannot grow.
Yes. These are all we need.
That's all he needs. He doesn't need to grow. He doesn't need to improve. He just needs the means to destroy his enemies, and everything will be fine, right?
Yeah. So, here he is. Same as always. 1-star ball on his forehead, wielding guns that he doesn't even want to wield himself because he's so unrealized that he hands them off to Shu to do his bidding for him, so that his logical side doesn't even need to take the responsibility for that malice.
Precisely. And so he gives them the guns and he
runs away.
Pieces off. Because like Brok was saying, he is so unrealized. And by that I mean he's so deceitful in the way that he puts forth his being in the world. He's so his ideal self, and let's talk Jungian terms, right? His ideal self and his real self are in such conflict that he can say one thing and have the cognitive dissonance to do this and think he's justified.
Right, he's unintegrated on a feminine and masculine level, right? Like, he's totally unintegrated, and that's why this is happening.
He is not in formation.
Yes.
Oops.
And so
neither are the aspects of his masculine and feminine psyche. Why would they be?
Well, this is a little bit new, right? Because up until now, they've done what he said.
But up until now, the threat of the ego loomed over them. Remember when they failed him in the past, what happened?
He used the castle to
used
dominate
the ego,
them.
Right.
Yeah. And now you can see them running away with the castle destroyed in the background.
Once that's gone, so let's say there's a person who tyrannizes themselves using their ego over their the aspects of themselves. Let's say someone who works at a 40-hour a week job at a call center or something, like really soul draining.
Sure. Who
tyrannizes themselves to go do it, forces themselves to go do it, right? That person is not going to be able to, when the time comes, be able to confront the things they need to confront because they weaken themselves so much by doing so.
Right. And when the time comes is, of course, when the ego is threatened or destroyed.
Exactly. Because that's the only thing keeping you going.
Right.
If that's all that's keeping you going, then you're not fulfilling what you should be. Unlike this guy.
Now we're back around. The sun has come out, as Pilaf was expecting it to, and it's not boiling our heroes alive. It's just the sun shining down upon the world, and things are back to...
giving warmth and enlightenment to our heroes who have then deserved it and who have taken advantage, metaphorically, of the mushrooms that are apparent in this area.
Right.
They have grown, though Pilaf has not.
Exactly. And we're not seeing Pilaf facing enlightenment.
And so, we do see Goku here unconscious. And the reason Goku is unconscious is because at the moment, he's unable to reconcile his shadow with himself. And there's a reason for that. And that's because he himself has not experienced true malevolence beyond his own imagining. He's only experienced Pilaf right now. It's going to take him encountering a challenge that he cannot defeat to be able to
defeat through his current mode of being.
Sure. To wrestle with that. And we'll see how that works out in the next season. But here he's unconscious because he can't face... he can't consciously face the fact that his shadow has possessed him for a time.
Right.
Oh no. And that's exactly it.
Yeah, Bulma says here, it's probably best not to tell him he was the one who trampled his grandpa. That's kind of like saying, it's best not to tell someone if they have not integrated their shadow or are not ready to integrate their shadow, that it is within him the ability to destroy that which you care about the most.
It's more than that. This is saying it's better that people not know that the sins of their ancestors kill the idealized versions of those ancestors to them. Think about slavery and the founding fathers. This is exactly it. right? The idea that shadow, right, the malicious part of it destroys the idea of the value of your ancestry.
I see.
And that's what it did, right?
And until you can integrate your own shadow, you can't truly respect it. If you are introduced to that knowledge.
Yes. And that's why so many people in
Man.
school.
Yeah.
That's why so many people in school are introduced to the idea, and they haven't reconciled their shadow, and so they think that they would be on the side of moral justice.
Sure, they assume they would be.
Of course. Because they, at this time, like Goku, have not been informed that that is what destroys the value of your ancestry. That's what kills God.
Yeah. God as such.
And so then we have here a cheeky reference to kind of what we're talking about right now and how it relates to us as humans, right? Like, it's intense. This is some good art. It has some good things to say.
Maybe he's an alien.
And this is to say,
well, alien doesn't mean alien, right? That's to say, maybe he is from up above, from the stars.
See, I think this is to say, okay, a little bit of that, but I think it's also to say that it's kind of the orphan type mythology that comes with
the questionable
Superman
ancestry,
and Batman and I mean Superman specifically coming down from the stars, right? It is that exactly to say that he is not of this world, and there's a significance to that, but we can't even get into that now. This is the full.
It's to say that within him he carries an enlightenment from a place above.
But that's the thing. This is very important because Toriyama apparently didn't think of any of this, right? But we have the fool, who is the character who is supposed to say this thing, say the thing that precedes the story that's going to happen later.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an accident?
Sure. Maybe.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think that Toriyama knows that there is significance. There is a significance to having the archetypal hero be someone who is not beholden to the debts and hardships of the society in which they find themselves in, but overcome them anyways.
It's the voluntary acceptance, but without having earned those responsibilities, right?
Well, without having,
and I think that's something that we all
inherited them. Or, yeah.
Yeah, like he didn't earn them; he inherited them just by a circumstance, right? And that's something that people can't seem to reconcile these days. That they're inheriting a responsibility that they did not earn.
There's like, why do I have to have this responsibility?
Yeah, it's like it's all about rights. It's all about like
I shouldn't have to deal with this, right?
Yeah.
And so go ahead here on this one.
I don't even know if there's much of a meaning to this one. It was just funny because he is exposed and vulnerable here as a result of what he's done with not even consciously, you know. And Bulma says, well, give him those panties to cover himself up, right? And it's like...
Well, she covers herself up, by the way.
Yeah.
It's actually ironic.
Yeah, it's like give him your wish to cover his vulnerability as a result of this. I don't know if I can really articulate it, but Oolong obviously doesn't do it, you know. It's like,
well, I think Oolong doesn't do it because a masculine spirit would know that the sacrificing of that spirit to be concealed, or let's say have the security of a feminine source, being the panties, right, coming from the oh man, I'm looking for a word.
Well, I think it's tied into why he gives them.
Give me a second. I'm coming up with it.
While you come up with it.
Oh, man. Step out. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Whew. Oh, man. It's intent. It's like really close to intent. Anyhow, yeah, so we'll just say intent. The intent of using that feminine security to protect oneself is not worth what you sacrifice, or what is worth one masculine sacrifice, especially with that intent behind it, which originally intent was obviously lecherous and self-serving. Even though that mode of being was above Pilaf, it doesn't mean that that is a mode of being he wants Goku to adopt. He doesn't want Goku to be like him. He knows that Goku is more than him, and therefore giving him the panties would debase Goku. And therefore, he doesn't go ahead and do that. Next here, we have Puar sleeping, and I think it's significant to say that the act of severing the tie between one's ancestry, one's shadow, and oneself is a very tiring prospect. And I think the reason that Puar here is asleep too is because Puar is like Brok said earlier, the tool of Yamcha's will. That's something else that's exhausting. And Puar has done a lot in the last couple of hours. And there is plenty of reason to understand her exhaustion. But before that, I was saying that the panties, the reason that Oolong doesn't give the panties to Goku is because Oolong doesn't want him to be like him. Oolong doesn't want Goku to be the fool. And imagine how foolish Goku would be if he actually put on those panties, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like, you don't think of the panties as panties. You think of panties as a crown, right? It's the crown that Oolong wears. It's like,
right, but Blooma doesn't see it that way because she's not that mode. She's not a masculine mode of being. And so she says, wear them.
Yes.
Wear them, because I'll let you go ahead if you want to say.
Yeah. Well, that is the crown that the fool, on at least the prototypical sort of masculine hero, would wear, right? And that's not Goku's crown. Like Goku's crown is his hair, and Goku's crown is himself. Like, it's not something for Goku to wear, period, because that's just not how it is. That's not how Goku's character is, and so obviously he gives him pants. He's like, okay, well, if Goku needs to be covered up, then I will just give him pants.
Right, and then I was talking about Puar briefly. Yeah. Did you want to mention anything about her?
No, it's just that Yamcha's exhausted that aspect of himself to accomplish something pretty important for him.
Yeah. And so there are the pants. We have Huckleberry Goku. It's pretty amazing.
Goku is realizing that he no longer has his tail. I've been trying to figure out what I was going to say about this when we got here. The first time a character has their tail cut off. This is Goku now, fresh in the world, sort of on his own accord. And I think that it happens at the same time, that now the feminine and masculine have the potential to be integrated together in a healthy way. It's like that all he's kind of freed together
from that, right? And that is what happens, is that you make your own community free from that baggage, and that's how you kind of can relieve yourself of it. But I want to note too that the Dragon Crew is a gas that Goku thinks that it'll come back. His tail will come back. But Goku actually knows something specific. Goku knows something specific. We'll mention that in a minute. He knows that his past is not going to go away, even though he doesn't consciously know it.
He sort of has that innate wisdom. That's part of him being that alien, right?
Right.
Like he has it in him rather than needing to have it given to him.
Exactly. And so, yeah, let's say let's address this from Chris Sombra. With the pants gone, Oolong has now lost the last piece of his uniform. It's true. He is no longer a communist pig.
That's his arc.
He is now valuing the individual, right, over, let's say, the collective good of Oolong.
Yeah, I guess you could say.
Because, I mean, think about the beginning. He has all these young women with him, right? And he thinks he's doing good by them because he's actually, like, doing a lot for them and, like, buying them stuff and all this.
And
right?
suffering for it.
And suffering for it. He's living for others.
Mm-hmm.
The collective good of Oolong. What he thinks is the collective good of Oolong. And at this point now, he has valued the individual so much that he has valued himself enough to realize his mode of being, as flawed as he is, as bad as he is better than someone who is accepting malice and trying to be more malicious in their mode of being.
Well, that's why he takes his own clothing and gives it away to somebody who needs it now. Because
he realizes the lack of value in his mode of being previously.
Right, that it would be more valuable for Goku to have his pants than for him to just keep having them, right?
And here they are, Huckleberry Goku.
Yeah, he's realizing here that he doesn't have his tail. He falls over. I didn't get a frame of it, but he falls over immediately.
Oh, no, you didn't. That's what I was saying about it coming back. We'll get to it. There is one. I don't care about my tail, but have you seen my Noibo? So he's asking about the power pole because, right, especially since he's lost now his tail, which unknowingly, unconsciously he knows ties to his heritage and ancestry. His power pole is actually a direct manifestation of it. And he can more easily identify it. And it's infinite reach.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's such a powerful thing to have. So he wants to go find it.
Right. Well, obviously, whenever you lose that connection, you lose the power tied to it, and you need to go and get it for yourself.
Exactly.
Right? And this could have been like a whole episode's worth of shit.
Well, I mean, you can take that in a microcosm too and say when children adopt their shadow, let's say when a child is playing a game and let's say they're playing Monopoly and they flip the board, right? They manifest that shadow. The way to deal with that, right, is allowing for that redemption, right? The regaining of that respect for the ancestry, right? It's not punitive measures for their sake.
Right, and it's obvious where that is. It's in the ruins of the ego.
Precisely. And that's where you find it, is in the ruins of the ego. When you're in that depth, that's what brings you out. And, Goku doesn't have to go through too much here to get it back, but we'll see the ranges in which he has to explore his psyche throughout the show. Anything else on this?
Nope. I think that's exactly it.
Boom. And this is specific. Grandpa gave me that pull. That's exactly it. It's exactly why. It's the reverence and respect for the heritage and the paternal spirit that is driving Goku to get this back. He recognizes and respects the power that brings.
Well, that's why it's Grandpa Gohan and not like Papa Gohan.
Father Gohan.
Because that means something different.
Thank you, Father.
It's a totally different thing, right? Grandpa represents that ancestry that's a degree detached from you.
Well, right? That's why it's grand. I always used to think about that when I was a kid. I'm like, why is it grand? I looked up the etymology. It's like great father is what that means.
Right. It's father as such.
It's like one hierarchy. It is. It's one hierarchy extracted. But the great thing about grandfathers is they typically are the embodiment of that ancestral hierarchy on Earth for people, because oftentimes we don't get to know our great-grandparents well, especially throughout human history. But grandparents have consistently been around, have consistently been able to impart the wisdom of the past, just as Grandpa Gohan has done to Goku here.
Yeah, and this is like grandfather, right? Like the idea of the ancestry in the father, right, gave me this power, this tool that I can use to reach any distance. And now I need to get it back. Now that my relationship and reverence, in a sense, to my ancestry has been severed, I need to go get that power back.
I don't think, because that's unconscious. His tail's unconscious, right? I don't know that I would say it's as much reverence, but it is the connection to the blood heritage that you have and all of the baggage that comes along with that.
But what's happening here is, and it kind of happens right away, is to say that you can go reclaim that. That severing that does not weaken you.
It does weaken you a little bit, but as long as you're able to go beyond falling down a couple times.
As the logos, as the conscious self, it doesn't weaken you on that level, right? You still can use it. You can still wield it. It can still get you where you need to be at times too. But yeah, so and of course, I didn't get the first frame of it happening, but whenever he stands up and realizes he doesn't have his tail, he's off balance. He has trouble standing on his own 2 feet without it and needs to regain his footing and regain his balance.
And I mean, what do you think? No, I'll save that. Never mind. I'll save it for later. Let's continue.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is like a pair here that we're about to show.
So, after all said and done, out here in the light of day, Blooma's thinking to herself, well, the Dragon Balls have scattered. It's going to take a whole year before they can be gathered again. And I guess I'll just have to wait to get a
subservient boy who will do what I want.
Mm-hmm. And Yamcha's thinking, I guess I'm just afraid, and I'm just gonna have to stay afraid and not be able to get what I want.
Yet another year. Metal Gear. Anyways, so yeah, and it's apparent. It's apparent to the audience, right? They both overcome things specifically that have allowed them to come to this realization that's about to happen.
And so now, as Goku is retrieving the power and reach of the reverence of his ancestry from the ruins of the ego, so too are these characters now stepping beyond their own ego and seeing
under the shade of a mushroom.
Under the shade of the mushroom.
Precisely.
I found it. I just wanted this.
I thought you're like, I don't have one of him falling. You have 2.
I got 2 of them falling.
Boom. And it is to say that when the idea of your ancestors, if you have a high idea of your familial history and that's debased for you, then that will leave you on shaky ground. Your footing will be very much affected. And I don't mean like physically, obviously, but the footing of your mode of being, the way that you conduct yourself.
The ground you stand on.
Right, exactly. Your grounding will be shook.
Yep.
I'm literally shaking.
I love every panel of Goku falling because, so, you can't represent this in our panels, but there's this sequence where he's like, I'm going to go get the power pole back. And he takes like 5 steps and face plants. And he takes like 5 more steps and face plants. And he's like an Animal Crossing character on a bad luck day. He's like, whap.
It's hard to convey it, but exactly.
But he just keeps going anyway.
And so, now that is all back and everything is set right, the enlightenment has been received and accepted, and the growth from the night, from the full moon, has been able to manifest. Now we see the unrealized, not say unrealized, the unintegrated feminine. I wanted to address Puar first.
Sure.
The unintegrated feminine celebrating the idea of romance, and the 2 young lovers celebrating the idea of love in its infancy, because we'll see how their relationship works out.
Yeah.
But for now, right, it's the idea that
the idea that you could even approach a relationship and that you're worthy of it.
Well, maybe not just that you're worthy of it, because I think they both think they're worthy of it.
Well, worthy
and that's
on
the
a
idea.
Non-ego level, worthy on like an intrinsic value level.
But what I mean to say is that they haven't interfaced too much, right? They are celebrating the idea that the attraction and the availability. And this is something to celebrate. I don't want to disparage.
I guess I worded that.
This is the old way, is that the presence of a counterpart to yourself is what you should be looking for. And
I want to point this out real quick. I said the value, like your intrinsic value of yourself, is the opposite of what I should have said. It is the intrinsic value in the other based on the weakening of your ego. Because it's not ego death for either of them. But they've been grounded enough that now they say, oh, I'm not the center of the universe, so I'm going to come down a tier. And then you realize the other person doesn't have to be the center of the universe either.
Exactly, yes. And that's actually something that we as a society today have missed. Because think about Tinder, right? That is something that I need to be with a partner who is the center of the universe and the center of other people's universes.
Yeah, and it's almost like the amount of people who are pursuing the person that I'm with validates me.
Exactly, right.
Which I hate.
Precisely, and that is the opposite message that is presented here. I wasn't trying to disparage it. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, I wanted to correct it because as I was processing what I said, I was like, no, that's not what I mean.
Perfect, yeah. They sure are weird.
Something archetypally important is happening right here because they begin to dance, right? They're in tandem with each other. They're sort of integrating in that way. And as this happens, Yamcha, he's clumsy and he hurts Bulma because he doesn't really know how to dance. What do you have to say about that?
I think that the act of dancing is it's hard to say. Let me take a second to articulate, but I would say the art of dancing is precisely that intuition and developing the ability to read another person. And this is actually foreshadowing for what I was saying, that they are celebrating the idea of romance and love without actually having the substance to back it up through time. Well, and this is foreshadowing right here of it, because dancing, like I said, Yamcha should be able to read the signs that Bluma is giving him and be able to not injure her in this way.
Well, there's another aspect to it, too, that I think is important for Yamcha. And it's in the next panel, too, because... So, Yamcha's dancing with Bulma. He missteps and hurts her for it, right? And he stoops down and asks her if she's okay. Now, his reaction to that, in immediately going to her aid, he says, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Now I am." And before, if that had happened, Yamcha would run away. He would be blushing. He would be afraid. That's like the most terrifying thing for Yamcha pre the last two episodes, right? That he would be dancing with a girl and hurt her, right? It would tell him something extremely negative about himself, and he wouldn't be able to deal with it. And instead, he is empowered by the fact that that she's attracted to his concern for her, right? And so we see his image of himself in the next frame here. If you want to roll forward. Look at that, Yamcha.
That is ideal self and real self meeting, right?
Yeah, he has embraced his ability to do at least that thing.
And so Yamcha's, let's say his journey to becoming a ladies' man throughout the series starts here.
Right. This is now...
And this is to say, too, those young, if there are any young men that are watching this later on, like, just because you are not successful with women does not mean you have to continue to be that way.
And failing to dance with a woman doesn't mean that you have to be that way. And it doesn't mean that you are that way.
Exactly.
I like this. So Goku comes back, and they tell him that they've decided to go to the city together. I like the city in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z as sort of this representation of like society itself, right? It's like the masculine and feminine have been integrated, and they are ready to integrate into society, or at least the ideas of the masculine and the feminine are now ready to go confront the ideas of the judgment of society, right?
Yeah, and by doing so, they will fulfill the function of the merger of masculine and feminine in the necessities of society,
and placing it where it needs to be in culture, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Did you have anything else to say about the city?
No,
I think
the
that
city
it is interesting. We're gonna get to the city we're gonna get to the city and not
right away, but I think it's significant because of that.
It is, and we'll talk about it when we get there. I like the design of the cities, especially for what they represent.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Goku here, classic Goku. I'm going to stay with the Turtle Hermit. He has his power pole in hand, his infinitely reaching ancestral power, and he's wearing his overalls, ready as ever to better himself. And now he's decided that it is he who will decide what the path forward is. This is significant to say that now he is manifesting the journey forward. The story is no longer about Bluma and Oolong, because this is descriptive and prescriptive for society in the past of society in season 1. Now going forward, we're going to start seeing iterations of modernity and commentary and description of modernity going forward through Goku.
I think that's to say that Yamcha and Bulma are now ready to be integrated into society and into culture. And that is the way that society and culture should treat the masculine and the feminine. We are now ready to approach the way that you should treat the self. And so Goku's not going into the city with them. Because the way for Goku to be, or the way for you, the potential archetypal hero of your own story and the story, is not there. But it's with the Turtle Hermit. And we'll get to that. But that is why Goku now doesn't follow them into the city, which he doesn't follow them into the cultural sort of consciousness. He is instead going to do something more important that is more reflective of the self and what you're going to be able to take away from on sort of the individual level from what's happening in the next season, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that the growth that the rest of the Dragon crew is insignificant from now on, but it is to say that Goku's decision to do this is, and Yamcha actually probably could have at this point. If you think about it, at this point in the story, Yamcha could also go with the Turtle Hermit. However, because of his primary function, which is not strength, right? He wants to get married. He wants to shoulder the burden of marriage and children to fulfill his requirements biologically and societally.
Well,
Whereas
the societal masculine is kind of what I'm skewing towards, right?
Is aiming further than that. Goku is aiming beyond the individual, and he's been aiming at this thing for a while, as indicative by the 4 stars that are on the ball that he is gonna chase soon
that's
enough.
The legend of Goku, right?
And that is the legend of Goku, and that's why we're talking about it now.
Yeah, that's why the title of the episode.
This is the start.
Is the legend of Goku.
Yeah.
Because it's the legend. He is embodying something so far beyond just like the good societal masculine or feminine representation.
Which is
important.
It's important.
It's definitely important.
Definitely,
but
yeah.
That's not the legend.
Yeah, exactly. You won't become a legend that way.
You won't become a legend because you found a wife.
Precisely.
Goku's kind of pointing out why it is that he wants to go and train with the Turtle Hermit, and it's because he realizes that someone was strong enough to destroy that castle, right? Someone was so strong, something was so strong that it could destroy the manifestation of ego that Pilaf had created. And since he doesn't understand that it's within himself, he knows that he needs to become stronger. And even if he did, he would want to become stronger, I think. But
I mean, meta-analysis wise, it's important to note that it is him, because it's to say that you shouldn't measure yourself against other people. You should measure yourself against the strength of yourself. And he's unknowingly saying that he at one point was this strong, therefore he should be this strong consciously.
right, he should, if he has an unconscious strength, he should be able to embody it.
And this
willingly.
is something poignant, because I think that certain people who have a lot of strength in certain fields, let's say writing, George R. Martin, let's take Germ.
Let's take Germ.
And we'll say that Germ does not have that propensity, right, to measure himself against himself. He's like, I'm already successful. Let me play with my RC car.
That's basically it. Let me play in my hamster ball. Because,
and so this is the opposite mode of being of that, even though it's unconscious. Doesn't matter that
it doesn't have to be conscious, because, you know, that's Goku. Like, Goku doesn't even have to be conscious necessarily.
Goku's half the time not conscious.
Yeah. but it's to say that you should be trying to live up to your potential, conscious or unconscious, all the time.
Exactly. And you should be able to harness and be able to utilize the strength of your unconscious, which is what Goku's saying here, to rise to that occasion, to be able to use that, which is something that happens in, let's say, holy artistry. And I know this from my acting experiences. Like, it's almost, and you can ask actors that do this, is whenever they very much get into this character, it's almost if they're not there. It's almost as if they're watching themselves do this thing, right? And that's that holy embodiment that they should be more expertise in that craft.
Mm-hmm. So they invite Oolong to come along with them. And Oolong almost tells Goku at this point that it was him that destroyed the castle, and then Puar comes in and shuts him up. And then Oolong agrees to come with him into the city, and then Puar is very happy, and she's kind of clinging onto Oolong. I just like this panel because this is the indication that we're integrated now, that it's all coming together.
Right, and if you remember at the beginning, let's throw back to when Yamcha, Puar, Goku, Bluma, and Oolong all met. Oolong and Puar were at odds with each other. They hated each
Oolong,
other. Yeah, and look where they are now. And it's because Puar can respect the decisions Oolong has made, and Oolong actually never had animosity towards Puar. It was his own decisions that spoiled him in the eyes of the female gaze, the judgment of the female gaze, right? And now the female gaze
that's to say
is
that
approving of this panty-wearing pig.
No, that's to say that Yamcha looked down on Oolong. Oolong embodied a masculine spirit that Yamcha didn't have when it was necessary. Now Yamcha respects Oolong, and the extracted feminine aspect within Yamcha respects the masculinity within Oolong.
I think that I just wanted to also bring up the wish as well.
Yeah.
Besides the... Yeah.
But yeah, it's integrated now because Oolong has embodied the thing that he did not understand until now, right? He has begun to deserve that thing.
And these friends.
Yeah.
It's an important thing to
And
know.
even though he's smug and he's like, I guess I'll go along. I mean, it's like, this is where he belongs.
It's
right?
true, yeah. And so who needs Dragon Balls?
It's funny because it's the short-sighted nature of sort of the immature, both feminine and masculine. Upon coming into contact with this small level of reduction of ego, it's kind of great because they both realize the value in each other through the devaluation of their own ego, right? And their wishes both instantaneously, however short-sighted, become fulfilled. And so Goku's like, I always have to be gathering the Dragon Balls. And they say, well, who needs the Dragon Balls? I've already gotten my wish. It's really funny to me because they don't really understand the value of the Dragon Balls and what can be done with the Dragon Balls just yet. And they will. I mean, this is not a permanent state for them, obviously. The Dragon Balls are going to play a bigger role because these ideas are going to keep escalating and escalating as they go along. But right now, they're so... It's like the nascent feminine and masculine just coming into contact with each other and not having the context that there's anything beyond that. It's the societal feminine and masculine that are like, this is it. This is the point, right? Of course, Goku elucidates the point to them immediately in the next frame. How am I going to look for my grandpa's ball then?
How am I going to aim towards something that I perceive as better if I'm complicit on where I'm at?
Right. If I accept that the feminine and the masculine are where they're supposed to be societally and that is the scope of what I should aim towards, how am I going to better myself?
And so how are you? What
Don't
better
worry.
way?
You can have this dragon radar. So now we're coming full circle with the first episode, right?
It's true. Now, instead of Bluma keeping the Dragon Radar a secret from Goku and to herself, in order for her to get self-gratification, Bluma has accepted Goku and has actually respected Goku. Go ahead.
That's
I see
to
you
say
charging up over there.
So that's to say that when the feminine and the masculine are where they belong on a societal and cultural level, it will give the path to the archetypal hero where they need to go next. That is the baseline that you need to be able to transcend and find the path, which is to self-betterment, right? And that's the path that you've been handed. If you're listening to this before the year 2026 or something like that, the path is there, right? You can see the path. You have been handed that balance by society. The feminine and the masculine were where they belonged, and they handed you the Dragon Radar.
And you could ignore it.
And you can ignore it, but it has been handed to you.
But at your own peril.
Responsibility is yours. I mean, that's kind of why we sort of skipped the first season, right? Because what's relevant to you is the fact that you have the Dragon Radar, right? But it's really important to understand why
it's like
it is
Genesis,
that you do.
though.
Yeah, it is like Genesis. It's very like Genesis. It's like, here's the precursor, here's the foundation, here is what is to be respected about the place that you are in the world.
Here are the boundaries, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
Here's
so,
what the show is about.
Yeah.
The confrontation of ideas.
Yes. And so, so Bulma's handing the Dragon Radar off to Goku now. You, the archetypal hero, to go out there, to become better for the next year until you need to use it, right? And Goku knows inherently that he needs to become better before he uses it again, because that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're at the end of the first season now. Yamcha's thrown out his capsule.
I want to get to the next few before we do like
yeah,
closing.
I mean, I'm not wrapping it up yet, but
we're pretty much.
This is it, though. This is the point, because Yamcha has thrown his final capsule for the season.
Yeah.
The one that he's had all along, that he's never used. And it's not spoken that he had it or that he didn't know he had it or anything like that. But Yamcha has thrown out the capsule for something that can elevate him and anyone with him to the Logos.
Only able to use it with Bluma, perhaps.
Yeah, like the causality. I always talk about the causality and sort of the sequential nature of Dragon Ball. But
you look a little like Void.
Oh, do I? Thanks. The idea, though, it's like before now, why would he be able to? Why would he be able to throw a capsule out with a plane in it? I mean, this is like the Eagles in Mount Doom.
Right. Why does it happen at that time?
Yeah, why wouldn't they just use it all along? Right?
Yeah.
And there's a really good reason for that. Because it's thematically important that now, and we're going to see it in the next couple of frames, that Yamcha had this all along. Right? That he had a thing that could elevate him to get him where he wanted to be, which is the city now, right? The idea is that he's going to be in culture.
He had no direction.
Right.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I'm catching.
And within Bulma is that direction, which is why she's able to give the direction to Goku.
Yes. And so that direction is given, and he takes flight on his trusty Nimbus.
Now we don't really need to
cloud.
talk that much about the Nimbus because we know what that means, but
And
still,
we'll address it in our recap video. But yeah,
definitely.
he is going to be on the fastest track, the most forthright and truthful
Yeah,
track.
Goku's always, as from the point that he met Roshi, he's had this fast track. He can get on the Nimbus and get where he needs to go. But it's been difficult for Yamcha, you know? That's what this whole season has ultimately been about, so that Yamcha and Bulma can have that thing, because they couldn't ride on the
And
Nimbus.
thereby give Goku the freedom to pursue his own journey.
Yes. Because they needed to be put in the place where they belonged before he had the ability to go do that.
Yeah.
And we're here.
And here we are, kind of at the end of an era.
It's kind of cathartic, you know, to be looking at this, because we're finally here. Everyone is united. Everyone is happy. Everyone is able to go.
They're all in the sky.
They're able to get
orienting
to the place
themselves.
that they need to be,
Yeah.
that they want to be, right?
Yeah, it's really good. It's an excellent.
It's kind of emotional, you know, just to look at the frame. It's like,
It's an excellent end to this first season, because we have the culmination of Goku, who is as primal as can be as the first episode, but has grown immeasurably and is now able to orient himself, like we were saying, on the Nimbus towards his goals, which he is now able to manifest. The most important thing that he picked up from this season is his ability to manifest his own journey. I'm going to go train with the Turtle Hermit.
yeah. Until then, he was just kind of along for Bulma's journey, and then it
Well,
became
and that's what it
Yamcha's
is.
journey.
But when you're an adolescent, that's what it is. You need to subordinate yourself to someone else, to an idea that you deem valuable. Goku deeming the idea of traveling with Bulma valuable because of the values that were instilled in him by Grandpa Gohan.
the value of the unknown, the value of
Well, not just that,
confronting
but remember what Goku says in episode 1. He was like, Grandpa said, if I ever encounter a woman, I need to act properly and
right, to
Right.
respect.
yes.
I want to point out here, and also in the next panel, that they're green. That the front
Look at Yamcha.
Yamcha's just like on cloud 9 right now. He's like, oh boy. Well, they're green.
Oh, boy.
You think about the Dragon Radar, right? And it's sort of like this green grid, and then you see the point that you're going towards, right? And it's like Goku's on his own journey. They are sort of behind this green glass, like they are on the path. Like they are on their path as much as they can be, you know? And I don't know if it was even a conscious decision to do that, to put them, it's almost like they're in their own Dragon Radar, you know? But
It kind of is Dragon Radar-esque.
because of what the Dragon Radar really is, right?
Yeah, because it is that orientation towards enlightenment. They are oriented towards that for sure. I see what you're saying. Let's look at this last one here.
Second to last. It's just great. I think this is such a good. I mean, you can barely see Puar back there in Oolong, but I love this.
This is the last time they see each other for a while.
For a long time, yeah. This is the point where they're all happy. They all they're aligned on everything.
But this is also to say that it is important if your path converges from your friends as an adolescent.
You mean diverges?
What did I say?
Converges.
Yeah, diverges. You need to take the divergent path. I can say, for example, like I made mistakes similar to that, taking classes or going to schools or being around places where I knew my friends would be, right? Making decisions about that is like, that is not what you need to be considering at all.
Right. You need to be considering your path, the path. Capital
Even
T,
if
capital P.
and this is Goku's family. He doesn't have any other family, right? Like, this is Goku's family. Even your family, you can't make decisions saying, I need to make my decisions based on the path they're on. you have to take, if your path diverges, you have to take that divergent path.
That's the thing that
It's
I
the
mentioned a
proper
bit
way to be.
earlier with the integration of the shadow, right? The severance of the ancestry as an idea, not necessarily as a blood relation, but what you consider to be familial, what you consider to be a support structure, that in severing that, you take another step to integration.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
here
so
we
you
are.
have to take that path, which is what happens here. And away they go. And that is the close of Dragon Ball Season 1, Episode 13, The Legend of Goku.
This is the Legend of Goku now. I think it's such a good season. We'll get into the value of this season as a whole whenever we do our recap episode. And we try to sort of
I want to rename
condense
it to
it.
Capstone Episode.
Okay.
Because it's not going to be a recap. It's going to be, we've built all this content. We're going to be capping it off with something golden, right?
Sure.
Like
Just the top of the pyramid, yeah. On the same page.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, anything else we had to say about it? I just to reiterate this, this episode would to reiterate the whole season. So we'll get into more of like the talking about the ideas within this episode and other episodes in the past that we've already covered going forward. I just realized I have not been looking at my notes. Let me make sure we covered everything.
Yeah, I have no notes. I knew coming into this one that we would just go because it's just so dense and it's so straightforward at the same time. It's like,
Oh no, we pretty much covered everything.
yeah, it's just powerful. I think it's a powerful season of a show. Period. Not necessarily as a cartoon. It's just like as far as media goes. Like, this is a very concise, coherent, strong theme that I think it's effective. You know.
Well, there is a reason why this show and this piece of media or text is Toriyama's most wide-reaching, popular, acclaimed. All of those. It's not even his favorite, apparently.
Not even just Toriyama's. This is one of the most wide-reaching, acclaimed series of all time.
Yeah.
Period. I mean,
transcends cultural boundaries because of that mythological value that it has. And it does have that.
It's this sort of unilateral application.
It is because you can apply this to anything, right? The fool precedes the hero always, right? The reestablishment of the proper roles of the masculine and the feminine precedes the hero's journey, let's say. And you can see that too, because let's say Superman, Clark Kent, right? His parents in Smallville are that. They are the masculine and the feminine put in their proper place, right? Bruce Wayne, his parents, proper masculine and feminine in that place that is tried to be regained over time, right?
Well, I think that's why Batman's a little bit on the more postmodern side, right?
It is a little bit, yeah,
because it's the loss of that.
But like Spider-Man, that happens during the story, the first story generally, right? Is that loss of it? But they're there. You have that position. It's present in all these heroic stories, as well as, let's say, like Hercules had earthly parents, right? Jesus, Joseph and Mary, right? Earthly parents. It's that idea.
Right. It's about being, and that's why Goku's an alien. That thing that we're saying right now is it's about the voluntary acceptance of the thing that you have inherited, not by blood, but by circumstance from the earthly, limited ancestry that you have in this world. And I think that once Goku has begun, not necessarily fully done so, but once he has begun to integrate that and to respect that, he can start on his path
That's where his legend begins.
Yes.
And I think that's a good place to leave off. Any closing thoughts?
This is a really good show.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like. I mean, this is the first time Brock's seen Dragon Ball, so
yeah,
I'm really glad that you're enjoying it. But this is Get the Mic episode 13, The Legend of Goku. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you next time.